I sprint aimlessly through the city, as lost as I was during my escape from the Forest Harbinger's realm. Away is the only direction that matters to me, so I race down the streets, putting all the distance I can between me and the seraph, faster than I ever thought I could. Every stride floats almost effortlessly into the next. The last thing he did to me left me feeling not quite weightless, not a spirit sailing through the night with no useless, broken body to hold her down and trip her over her own legs, but close. What exactly did he do? I haven't looked back, but could he still be following me? Tracking me through the wisp of his power bearing me along? I don't feel him moving, but... Not long into my flight, a bright crimson burst illuminates the night from somewhere behind me. I glance over my shoulder, almost expecting another ambush, but find only a flash of fading light as the seraph's presence blinks abruptly out of being. I pause for a moment, making absolutely sure there's no trace of him hiding among the faint auras of life in the city. No. Not quite over. There was still another Harbinger attack in the hospital before I left. I called for help. No one should have been hurt more than they already were, but they've probably been on high alert since, waiting for someone to explain what was going on. Okay. Whatever. That's not how I wanted to give up my secret, but what does it matter anymore? Making this day a little longer is the very least of my problems, now. I don't even know if they'll let me stay when word of all the things I've done reaches them, and what am I supposed to do then? Go live with Dad and hope I don't still have health issues the hospital could actually help with? Live on the streets, feeding myself with life stolen from anyone who walks by. Can I even do that? Run off into the forest where I belong? Maybe it'll count for something if they know me as the girl who killed both of the 7th floor's recent harbingers before they hear about how I turned the Stardust Seraph's guts into centipedes. Even if I'm the one who brought Seriana there in the first place. Even if it's a bad joke to think someone like me could help anyone but myself. But I can't stay out here forever, so I'll just have to deal with any disasters that follow me home as they come. I fish out my phone, ask it for a route to the hospital, and start running again. 5 blocks out, I stop on an empty street corner to isolate the Seraph's enchantment and dunk it in rot until it disintegrates. I don't think he's following me, he should have more urgent things to deal with, but just in case he can use this to trace my path somehow, no reason to make it easy for him. But if I ignore the tight pain lingering in my throat and the thick, crawling dread of knowing more clearly with every moment's distance from fighting for my life that I've ruined everything again, it was kind of fun while it lasted. Much nicer than Shona's travel spell. And the moment it fades, my legs buckle beneath me. Numb tingling gnaws through my muscles. I summon my cane, and frantically fumble to catch myself with it, but my arms can't manage even that much. It slips from my shaky grasp, clattering away as I land on my elbows with a new thud of pain and a tiny breathless yelp. Of course that's how this would go. Fine. Fine. After a moment to catch my breath, I reach inside to prop myself up with my well of health. Nothing changes. There's nothing there. I somehow didn't notice until I tried to use it, but all the life I stole, all the people I hurt, it's almost all gone. I'm back down to the thinnest sliver of stolen essence after the Seraph burned my well, no, after I took all those unwilling sacrifices and threw them away for nothing. I did all the horrible things I've done just to end up back in that place where I can't even walk somewhere without feeling like my bones will collapse and my body will disintegrate into a puddle of nothing that hurts. I can't find the strength to move, to scream, to do anything more than collapse here and cry. I wonder if I'm crying ink or black ichor or something. I scrape my face with the back of my glove, then lick it. I don't know what I expected to be able to tell, but it doesn't taste weird. There's that, at least. Finally pushed along by the idea that even this late, someone will eventually find me like this and ask questions, I reach for my cane, gather the energy to shove my pain down, drag myself up on shivering limbs, and start the last stretch of the walk home. I dismiss my transformation after another block, leaving only my new cane, and pay no real mind to who might see me do it. I'm pretty far past the point where that matters. I manage not to fall over myself again before I reach the hospital, but I still need to clean things up there. And hope Sariana didn't hurt anyone else. In the circular driveway out front, an ambulance and police car are parked in front of the entrance with their lights blaring. I sigh, steady myself, and approach the paramedic standing watch at a healthy distance from the front doors. Excuse me. There's a potential emergency here that hasn't been cleared yet. We'll have to ask you to leave until O. He looks me over and cuts himself off. Are you the keeper we called to sweep this place? I tense up for a second before I realize they wouldn't send paramedics to answer a call about a dangerous rogue keeper. No, but you can cancel it anyway. I'm the one who pushed the alarm. The harbinger's dead. The medic draws a little closer and crouches to around my level. I'm sorry, miss, could you speak up a little? Okay. I said, paying more attention to myself. I only hear a faint ghost of the sound I meant to make. I said my voice has never carried well, but I am speaking up, or at least doing what I've always done to make it louder. It's just not working. Did the serif hurt my throat more than I thought? No, that's absurd. I live in a ward full of people whose sicknesses leave their voice weak and hoarse. They don't sound anything like the distant, creepy almost whispers coming from me now, no matter how hard I try to raise my voice. Emergence that isn't part of the normal growth process, isn't especially likely to empower you, and may not align with what you'd actually want for yourself. It makes sense, at least. I can't say it's some horrifying freakish mutation. What's the point of being heard if no one listens to me anyway? I laugh to myself at that, though I can hardly hear it over even the dim ambient noise of the city, and brush away a few new tears. Is something wrong? The medic asks through an uneasy grimace. No, sorry, I just emergence. Wasn't expecting it. Sorry, I say. Can you hear me alright like this? He nods. Okay. I live here. The hospice ward on the top floor. A harbinger I was hunting stalked me home sort of, but how she worked isn't really important here and attacked a nurse I know. That woman, do you know how she's doing? The sanctuary's keeping her overnight, but her vitals were stable when we found her. Good. Alright, I sigh. There's something that could be worse. If I'd actually gotten someone who's never been anything but kind to me killed doesn't matter. I didn't. I don't need to think about if. Anyway. The harbinger did it to get my attention. To provoke me. So I let her out, went somewhere empty, and killed her there. She's gone now, and she didn't hurt anyone else here. I think if she did, she'd have made sure I knew it. I see. From his expression, I really don't think he does, but that's fine. I can't be bothered explaining to a normal person how harbingers talk to me. Or how well I seem to understand them. That's all good to know. While we have you here, could I ask you to search the vicinity and confirm that? Not to question your judgment, it's just procedure for incidents like this. No traces of her inside. If she had any other victims, they're somewhere else. The medic glances back at the hospital, then shoots me an odd look. I think he was expecting me to actually go in and search for harbinger traces. My senses are pretty good, I say flatly. Well, alright, then. If you're certain, we'll go give the all clear. Thank you for your service. I blink. What are you thanking me for? I didn't do it for you. I've never done anything for anyone but me. I don't say that, of course. I just watch him on his way back to his van, then head inside. It's normal for the hospital to be quiet at night, but not for it to be deserted. Every desk and station that's supposed to be staffed at all hours is left unattended. The long hallways I'd normally see someone cleaning are empty. I probably should have expected this. At the scene of a harbinger attack with no keeper around to explain what's going on, it makes perfect sense to evacuate everyone who can safely leave, even if that's obviously more complicated than most places in a hospital. I wonder how the 7th floor's doing. I wonder how all the patients with nowhere else to go, no one to take them there, or no way to leave without causing a health crisis have managed while I was away. I guess I'll see soon enough. I make my way through the silent halls to the elevator, glaring at my reflection in the glass wall as it rises. My last wisp of black hair has gone white right, thinking on it now, the seraph did say something about that. Did he actually care? Would anything have changed if I'd told him I'm at risk of spontaneous emergence? Can we reschedule our fight for a week from today, rather than just kept fighting as hard as I could? Not like it matters now. The elevator pings, and I step out into the 7th floor entryway. It's just as quiet as the rest of the hospital and almost as empty. There's an old man sleeping in front of the TV and one younger nurse looking after him. Lyodane, there you are, she calls softly. She freezes for a second, no doubt taking in the gray veins winding over my face, then collects herself and waves me over. I'm glad you're all right. Does this mean they're bringing people back in now? Hi, I say, as clearly as I still can. And I think so. I don't know where anyone else who left went, but is there any point in playing things off as if they just let me back in, as if I had nothing to do with the alarm and this wasn't all my fault? No, not really. The responders outside were getting ready to leave, at least, I say simply. Actually, what are you still doing here? She smiles a bit nervously. Someone has to be on call, don't they? A lot of our patients can't just leave, and they obviously don't want people coming through to pick them up at times like this. So one of us stays behind, just in case. I volunteered. Thanks, I murmur. If anyone deserves thanks for all this, it's her. All I did was bring Sariana home in the first place. She sat here, knowing there'd be nothing she could do if a monster came back through, and looked out for these people anyway. And I've never noticed her at all before. I don't even know her name. I can't see her tag from here. I'm glad they weren't alone. And, I pause, tripping over my own thoughts this time. Do I actually want to know what I'm about to ask her? What if I don't like the answer? I don't know how much more misery I can take today. But my only alternative is to go hide under the covers, wait for the next terrible day to come and find me, and probably not sleep for worrying about it anyway. So here I go. Before I was looking for Noirin, but she was having a bad health day. Do you know how she's doing? Is she around? Oh. Yes, she came back up not too long ago. She should be in her room. I'm sure she'd appreciate it if you wanted to check in on her. It's a relief that she's okay, of course, but I'm not so sure about that. Do I even still want to talk to her? I guess I'd already done plenty of horrible things when I was planning to earlier. Nothing's changed on that front except how likely my sins are to break down my door and drag me away. But if even she wants nothing to do with me once I tell her how I've spent the last month, at least I'll be sure I deserve it. It's unlocked. Come in. Noirin's voice calls at my knock on her door. As I step inside, Noirin smiles, waves weakly from her bed, and sets the book she was reading down in her lap. It's Demystifying the Tarot, one of the first guidebooks every tarot person reads. Oh, have you gone all the way with the hair? I like it. That color really does suit you, she says. If she has anything to say about the veins, she keeps it to herself. Thank you, I mumble. How's the book? It's interesting. I picked up a copy for my son, too. I always thought it was a bit of a shame when he gave up on this stuff just because it wasn't the same as getting real magic. Have you read it? She doesn't acknowledge my voice either. Emicham. That's one of the good ones, although there is something to say for reading the bad ones too and deciding which is which. You can borrow my others, if you want. I've already read them all. I think I'll take you up on that, she nods. Your room is nice. This is my first time visiting anyone else's room here. Neuren's looks a lot like mine, of course, only hers is decorated all over with glazed bowls and jars, products of the pottery class she teaches, probably. An arrangement of blue flowers sits in a thin handmade vase on her nightstand. It's not so special. You should see how Sabina down the halls managed to decorate hers. But thank you. Oh, and your shirt's on inside out, she notes. Oops. I never ended up taking it off. I know, I say. Neuren tilts her head a little. A friend found it for me earlier, but I realized on the way home I shouldn't wear it here. It's fine. Why not? Who said there was a dress code in my bedroom, of all places? No one. It just felt like kind of a mean joke. Neuren rolls her eyes. Lyodane, there are not a lot of perks to being here. The most important one is that there's nothing keeping you from doing whatever you want. If you like it, you should wear it. I insist. I hesitate for a moment, biting my lip, before I grumble out a sure. Here, and pull the sweater off. I shake my hair out and flip the sweater over before I put it back on. See what I mean now? Neuren looks down, squinting. Tummy ache, she mutters to herself, then snorts out a cheery laugh. What? I attempt to wail. Nothing, she says through her dry cackles. Nothing at all, because that's funny. Despite the rasps, she can't seem to stop giggling. Oh, honey, it's your problem. We're all going through this together. We're allowed to have fun with it if we want. Here, it's like this. They sent me in for oxygen therapy earlier. The technician who set me up in that pressure chamber, they have asked me if I had any respiratory issues. Just, going down the list the way they do. Do you know what I told him? Oh, just the cancer. And despite my exhaustion, despite the throbbing pain aching across my entire body, despite what amounts to my life hanging by a thread, despite everything, I come the closest I still can to bursting out laughing. I wouldn't have thought I had the energy left to laugh, never mind everything else. I can't even bring myself to feel bad about the faint, eerie, echo of laughter I'm filling the room with. Neuren, for her part, only grins back at me. Say, I don't think I ever told you this. Not too long after I had my son, I had uterine cancer. Had an easy recovery from that one, but, well, lightning always strikes twice, doesn't it? No, I didn't know. I'm sorry, I wheeze, forcibly collecting myself. I can barely imagine recovering from the thing that's plagued me all my life just to die of some other horrible sickness. Don't be. The damn thing had already done its job when they took it out. I was just happy to be rid of it. I only bring it up because for a good while after that, my great joy in life was giving every nurse who asked me about my last period a hard time. Have you talked to a doctor about that? Is there any chance you could be pregnant? I got that last one for years after the fact. That baby was really taking its time. A fresh fit of creepy giggles escapes my throat. Years? Seriously? Neuren raises two open palms, shakes her head, and sighs dramatically. I know. Is it really that much work to read my chart? Ah, but now I'm just rambling about myself. Glad to see you've gotten something out of it, though. How have you been doing? I heard I missed quite a day down in the oxygen chamber. It was a long day. A long story, I sigh. Can I start a while before that? Neuren shrugs. I wasn't doing anything important. All right. I take a seat in the chair next to her bed, steady myself, and spend a long, silent while gathering my thoughts. Neuren only watches and waits patiently. So. Around a month ago, when we had that harbinger here, I made the promise. I chased it when it left. I killed it. And that was about the only thing I've done right since. Oh, Neuren says. I was starting to wonder if you just didn't want to talk about that at all. What? I croak. Neuren chuckles to herself. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm flattered you were willing to tell me, and this isn't exactly the easiest place to keep a big secret. I'm sure you were doing your best. But if you told me after the first change, I think I may have been a little more surprised than I was when my son introduced me to his first boyfriend. I mean, was that a surprise? I asked dumbly. He'd never quite struck me as that type, that's all, she shrugs. Nice man, though. They're married now. After my first transplant, before it was clear just how badly things had gone, there was a short while where I tried to hide how much pain I was in from my friends. I didn't say anything about my health, and when Grain asked how I was doing, I did my best to brush it off. I didn't want anyone to see some huge gap growing between our lives and leave me behind. At the time, I thought I was putting up a pretty good front. But what you don't say about yourself can say just as much, and the subjects I've been avoiding are so far from the only hint someone could look at me and find it's absurd. Does everyone already know? I ask. I don't know if they're gossiping about you or anything like that. Maybe some of them don't want to draw conclusions if they aren't sure. But the ones who pay attention to other people? Probably. And more importantly, congratulations. No one here will be anything but happy for you, if that's what you were worrying about. No. That's not it. They won't. You won't. It'd be great if I could believe that, but... I bite my lip and start to cry again. Lyodane. It's all right, Noirin says gently. It's really not. I mean, yes. At first that was all it was. I didn't want the attention. I didn't want to rub it in people's faces that only I get to break the world to maybe fix myself just because I'm 13. But I'm also just I didn't know what an awful person I was until I had the power to be as awful as I wanted. I trail off. Noirin sighs out a deep breath, filling the uncomfortable silence. I hope this comes off the way I mean it to, but it never sat right with me. The way some people look at keepers as these incredible saints standing above the world. You can do incredible things, yes, and you're the only thing keeping us all safe, but you're still kids. Well, you aren't kids forever. I don't think anybody would describe Iona Fianata that way, but you understand. And kids make mistakes. Kids, if you'll pardon my saying, do stupid things. That doesn't change just because the things you can do are so much bigger than anything I could. So, I can believe that you've made mistakes or done bad things in the last month. I don't think they make you a monster who can never do better. You wouldn't say that if you knew. Noirin folds her hands over her book. Try me. Fine. I snap. I have disease magic. Powers that work by taking everything wrong with me and forcing it on someone else instead. I've been keeping myself standing by stealing health from other random people, so many of them I've lost count. All those rashes of weird sickness around the city. Those were me. One of them was a keeper I was fighting with, and she was the first of 3 other keepers I've hurt. The one tonight started a fight so he could stop me from eating people, and the girl before that was just trying to kill a harbinger I was protecting. So I could see what would happen if I let it grow before I ate it. And I'm still not even sure if killing that harbinger was the right thing to do. I spit, finally stopping to catch my breath. Even speaking that much feels like an effort now, like forcing the words into the right shapes and sounds is its own new act of will. Noirin sits quietly through all this, listening, nodding along, and as I rant, a slight frown mars her face. Whatever she's thinking, whatever she said before, I just don't believe any normal, decent person could see what I am and group me with normal kids getting into fights on the playground. Do you do hugs? She finally asks, opening her arms a little. Huh? Why? Just an offer. Up to you. I don't, really. Not unless Pearl counts. Not since I had friends. I've never wanted pity hugs. I've never needed affection from someone who just wants to feel like they're being nice to a cute little dying girl. But right now from one of the only people in my life who's never talked down to me. I pull my chair a little closer, scoot into Neuren's arms, and cry silently. I'll be honest, I only caught so much of that, Neuren says. It sounds like you've had a very long day, though, and it's not really my help you need. I'm not sure whose it is, but I don't know much about the world you live in now. All I can do is listen. And for whatever it's worth, I've never known any truly awful people who spend their time sitting and thinking about what they've done wrong, let alone talking about it. A friend's gentle voice in my ear. A hand on my back as thin and frail as my own. It isn't much. It doesn't change anything, not really. But it's nice. So I won't say everything's going to be okay. I'd love it if I could, but I don't know that, and I do know how you feel about platitudes. But you're a smart girl. I think you can figure something out, even if it takes some help. And I think, right now, you just need someone to listen, and then some rest. The world won't end if you don't solve whatever you're facing right this moment. Will it? She asks. It doesn't sound like a serious question, but I can't quite be sure. I don't think so, I whisper back. Good to know, she nods. Why don't you see how you feel about all this in the morning, then? Sure. And thanks. Any time. I lean into my cane, shuffle to my feet, and head for the door. Oh, I wasn't sure if I should mention it when you came in, but that cane is new too, isn't it? She calls after me. Did you make it yourself? Is that how it works? I did, I answer. Well, it's much nicer than the ones they hand out here. Matches your outfits well. That's all I wanted to say. Oh. Thank you. Good night, Neuren. Back in my room, Pearl's smiling face waiting on my pillow gives me just enough strength to keep from flopping into bed and skipping my nightly routine. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the world will end tomorrow. Maybe the Stardust Seraph or someone worse will come crashing through my window while I sleep. But I can't do anything about that. I can only do what I can to keep tomorrow from being any worse. And if nothing else, Pearl still gives good hugs too. Perhaps not tonight. Until next time, rest well. Shona practically skipped out of the ambulance, twirled around as she landed on one foot, and gave a wide wave before she finally touched down on both legs. Thanks again for the ride, guys, she yelled to the drivers. And see you tomorrow, Aisling. No. Get some rest. Aisling shot back. She gave a sidelong glance, but kept right up with frantically typing on her phone. Maid scooted past Aisling and climbed out of the car without fanfare. When was the last time you got any rest? She asked. I'm not at risk of exploding if I don't take a good nap, Aisling deflected. So don't worry about me. I know how to pace myself. When did that girl last take a nap, anyway? Shona'd never figured out how literal she was about the whole never sleep again thing when they first met. Truth's lantern couldn't lie, sure, but how abstract could she get with that? Were figures of speech off limits too? Whatever. Maid froze in mid-climb, holding one foot just off the ground. Hold on, exploding. Is that a thing we need to watch out for? Probably not. But you get my point, don't you? And why shouldn't she see you tomorrow, anyway? We go to the same school, Maid pressed. Aisling leaned down, putting a hand to her forehead. Sorry, right, yes. Lots on my mind. Still putting in reports, making sure I'm not missing any info anyone has on Isabel's Harbinger. I suppose there's no harm in going to school if that's what you really want to do, Shona. I recommend, though, that you do whichever mundane things make you particularly happy, and I don't expect that school is at the top of your list. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Nah, sure, you got my number all right, Shona admitted. So I guess I'll see you whenever. And I'm sorry again about your friend. We'll be on call whenever you know what to do next and when I'm better, she said, cutting off the objection she knew was coming otherwise. Thank you. I'll keep you updated. Now go take care of yourself. With that, Aisling pulled the ambulance doors shut. The van drove off, leaving them alone in front of Maid's house. Maid grunted, still watching the ambulance go. This'll be fun, though, yeah. Like old times, only nobody can tell us when the party's over. Yeah. Eventually, she turned around, wearing the sort of strange smile she put on when she didn't want to show anyone what she was feeling. Shona, is it time yet to talk about whatever happened back there? It's fine if not, but it's just us now, and if Maid never asked how she was feeling, she'd probably stuff it in the closet and keep pouring it out through her power until everyone could hear. Yeah. They'd been there before. Just never with something so. The dam broke. Scenes from the wound stabbed through her mind's eye. That face staring through her in the last place it belonged. That voice, exactly like the one she'd spent so long running just to make it to a place where she'd never have to listen to anything it said ever again. Her skin charred off her bones by Shona's power over and over and over and never enough to get away. Maid wrapped her arms around her just before she started screaming into the night, her hoarse cries amplified into unearthly shrieks of noise music distortion. Oh, and here's some good news. I've booked you another interview. Her producer, a broad, slightly pudgy man, looked all too pleased with himself. Great, Shona said tonelessly, not trying at all to hide how she felt about his good news. Shona, Mom hissed through her plastered-on smile. That's wonderful news. Thank you, Mr. Burke. Hey, and if you hear me out, I think you'll be excited about this one, he said, spreading his hands wide. The guest is Irita Devereaux. Shona'd already started rolling her eyes before the name left his mouth. But when she heard it, the whole world froze. You wait, okay, I'm just how, she croaked. Irita was the unchallenged king of New Claris. She'd climbed much too high to spend her time talking to any old idiot with a microphone. So why? What did she have to say to her of all people that she hadn't said 100 times before? I wish I knew. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much when the team reached out to her, but you miss every shot you don't take, right? Oh, I always knew you were too bright to ever burn out. Mom cheered. Tears welled in the corners of her eyes, never quite falling. Did you ever imagine, Shona? Isn't that incredible? Shona couldn't even get herself to argue on principle. Her heart-bursting excitement faded a little when they got to the interview ground rules. Irita's modest list of forbidden subjects wasn't a problem, but the showrunners, same as last time, they pretty much wanted her to act like she was interviewing a guest star magical guardian instead of an actual real-life keeper. Nothing too heavy. Nothing too real. Nothing that would pop the show's bubble world where magic was all about punching your friends' bad feelings away, then helping them feel better over a nice meal. Just ask her about shogi and her favorite things to do with magic, something like that. Plenty of people in the scene have talked to the Silver King. We want your audience to feel like they can talk to her too. Keep it on their level. Show them what's fun about being her, alright? Mr. Burke had said. Bleh. Well, it was more than most people ever got to talk to Irita about. It sucked to come so close and know that Irita wouldn't be talking to her in return, but she should really be happy with this much. They'd decided to open the interview with a game. The producer thought it would be fun to teach everyone how the Silver King's favorite game worked. That worked for Shona, who'd already decided. Without telling anyone that if she couldn't actually ask or talk about keeper stuff, she'd just let Irita guide that side of the conversation. Sadly, Shona was not very good at shogi at the best of times, and in front of a live audience and maybe the whole world with the best, coolest keeper in the city really didn't feel like her best of times. She squinted, leaned over the shogi board, and pointed to the piece with the most complicated squiggly characters. Sorry, how's this guy move again? Beneath the table, she wiped her free hand on Magical Guardian Camelia's flouncy pink skirt, desperately hoping the cameras wouldn't catch her brushing off the sweat. Today, Irita sat in an ordinary wheelchair rather than the palanquin she rode into battle, not that she looked any less majestic for it. Dressed in her keeper outfit, the elaborate azure uniform of a general fighting for the sole cause of fashion, well, if generals wore skirts and ribbons and tiny white gloves and hairpin insignias. Skin inhumanly pale and smooth as porcelain, silver blue hair worn in an elaborate braid that trailed over one shoulder while leaving a few locks free on the other side. She seemed to have styled it differently every time Shona saw her. Sapphire-colored eyes twinkling with light and life. Literally twinkling, they were solid blue, with no whites whatsoever, and in place of pupils and irises they each had 5 flecks of light twirling around a tiny sun pupil in an endless synchronized dance. Irita lowered her teacup and passed it to the soldier at her side, still holding the teapot he'd poured it from. He was an odd half-real specter, a human-like shape clad in something that seemed to waver mistily between being a stiff military uniform and old plate armor, his face covered by a thin cloth veil bearing a swirly glyph not quite like the ones on the shogi pieces. "One square, forward or any diagonal direction," Irita said. "Right. Thanks." Shona scooted the squiggly guy up to protect her knight. "Are you sure you want to do that?" Irita asked. Her softly smiling face gave away nothing. "Let's see." Shona gave the board a quick glance. If she was missing something big, she didn't see it. Yep. That's the move. She remembered how the knights moved from playing chess with Dad. Shogi knights weren't as good, but their move was still the coolest. If she lost them, she'd miss her favorite little guys too much to focus on the rest of the game, so it only made sense to look out for them no matter what. "Alright, then." Irita picked up her bishop, slipped it through a gap in Shona's wall left by the squiggly guy, and captured her king. Oh. Oops, Shona stammered. "Hey, hold on, you can do that. You don't have to say, 'That's no good, your king's in trouble now,' or whatever." "I don't. I usually would with a beginner, but, well. You did ask me not to go the least bit easy." That's okay," Shona shrugged. "I resign. We all knew how this would go. But this is just the first time. I'm sure there's a long way to go to catch up, but I won't stop running till I reach you." "Maybe someday," Irita said with a patient smile. "Someday. For sure. You just wait and see." Shona aimed a finger gun her way and winked. "Maybe so. Until then, well, in your position, I would have accepted the handicap. Nobody dives into anything as complex as shogi and conquers it in a day. There's no shame in approaching something new as a beginner, taking your time to learn it properly." "Yeah, you're absolutely right. Big things, like people, always start small. It's okay to work within your limits starting out." Shona nodded along eagerly. They'd love that backstage. It felt a bit like one of those end-of-episode morals, but it still sounded like Irita. If anyone could find a way to make this cool, she could. That in mind, anything you want to tell us about the right way to learn? How'd you pick up the game? I don't think there was much of a shogi scene here until you came along, so what made you choose it over chess or something? What kind of monster would choose to play chess?" Irita asked, scowling in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. Shona laughed, several voices in the audience joining her. Irita only grinned and sipped her tea. Now and then, if you poked her just the right way, Irita would go off on a passionate rant about the game design failures of chess. Everyone loved those screeds, even the ones who had no idea what she was talking about. It was just fun to see the city's unflinchingly kind and polite hero taking something so silly so seriously. As she spoke, Irita swiftly arranged the pieces on both sides of the board, staging an elaborate endgame showdown between them. Fluid and graceful, she held the pieces deftly between the sides of her index and ring fingers as she moved them, as a professional of her standing would. Every movement ended in her placing a piece with that satisfying wooden clack Shona never managed to do quite right. Until someone pushes through all the chaos and finds the way to organize them, just so. I don't see life in it or anything so cliché, mind you. No one game can contain the world. But I do see what I see when I look at the world. My place in all this, my strengths, my limitations and how I work around them. It isn't my only calling in life, certainly not my highest, but it's become a big enough part of how I think to shape my magic around it. She gestured over her shoulder with her free hand, nodding to the two ghostly soldiers beside and directly behind her. What if someone else had chess magic? Would they have to be your rival? Or is chess just not cool enough to give someone powers? Shona prodded. Shogi didn't give me powers, Irita chuckled. But no, I don't see any reason why another keeper couldn't use chess as their implement, if they saw things through it the way I do through my game. They just have very poor taste, she finished to a few more scattered laughs. Well, there you go. And I'm sure you beat them at their game as badly as you just beat me. Shona pumped one fist in a quiet cheer. Oh, I don't know about that. Irita lowered her head and set her now empty cup aside, where the teapot soldier picked it up and stored it away somewhere. Just because I don't think something is worth doing doesn't make me good at it. I don't even know if I'll ever be the best player at my game, you know. Wait a sec, you aren't the best player. Shona gawked at her, playing up her disbelief. Who do I need to run from if I ever meet them? As of last month, I'm the second best Clarish player. If you're watching, Blaine, congratulations again. Irita turned and waved to the camera. When she looked back at Shona, her smile seemed a bit wistful. I know. Ironic, isn't it? Ha. Shona'd never thought about that. She'd already been Irita's fan, everyone was, but she didn't know enough shogi to follow her in the rankings or anything. But you were one of those super prodigy kids, right? What changed? Well, it's the same way with people who are the very best at anything, isn't it? You can't just be good. You have to take every opportunity to improve yourself. The top players all eat, sleep, and breathe shogi, and I can't do that anymore. I've taken other opportunities. Which I don't regret at all, mind you. You don't need to be the best at something to keep appreciating it. Sorry if I'm a little stuck on this, just what's a normal person have to do to be better than someone with literal shogi magic? Not at all. It's interesting to think about, not to mention a bit uplifting for everyone who isn't a keeper. More tea? Oh, sure. Thanks. Irita flicked her eyes at the soldier to their side, who immediately retrieved her cup and teapot from the same mystery space he'd been holding them in and topped them off. She inclined her head in thanks and took a long sip before she spoke again. It's like this. Shogi doesn't exactly have a city, it's from Island or ascetics developed it, that's why the pieces are all labeled in that old classical Thalassic script, but it's most popular in Rima. There, nearly all of the best players have been studying with experts since they were children. They even have a maximum age to join the Professional Players Guild. If you haven't made it by the time you turn 21, you're no longer qualified. I don't know if I quite agree with that rule, there are exceptions in everything, but there is a certain logic to it. If you're approaching the game as an art, it does make sense to focus on nurturing the people called to it, players who've loved it more than anything all their lives. That's where most of the masters who've elevated the game came from. Right. Thanks, Shona said slowly. You've mentioned things calling to people a few times now. Could you tell us what you mean by that? Irita's eyes literally lit up, the tiny stars inside them brightening. Their endless dance seemed to move a little faster. I think some careers are more like callings. The people who take them up do it because they need to. Because it's what they were made for, or where they feel like they belong, or the only way to achieve what they want the most. That's not to say I'm only speaking of the biggest, grandest things anyone can do. There are callings great and small, from shogi professionals to airship pilots to sanctuary workers to city council members. We need them all. Well, maybe we don't need shogi in quite the same way we need those other things, but you understand, and they're done best when they're done by people who, for their own reasons, have to do them. Careful, Shona. This could get a bit out of bounds, someone's voice said through her earpiece. Thanks. Shona stopped herself, chewing on her words for a few long seconds. Blurg, of course they'd cut her off here, right when it seemed like she'd found something the Silver King actually wanted to talk about. She knew why they didn't want to hear it, obviously. Camellia would have missed it. She'd say something about how cool it was that anyone who really committed to what they love could be the best at it one day and move right along. But Shona didn't. Shona wasn't too blind to tell when someone was talking about two things at once. Do you think being a keeper is one of those? Shona asked. Forcing the words out felt like trying to make herself touch a hot stove, but there they were. I do, Irita said, mildly but without hesitation. What are you doing? The voice in her ear snapped at the same time. That was the first thing on our no-go list. Okay. Fine. See if we can bring it back to. Shona wasn't listening. Her mouth went dry. Even if she had any idea what to say, the words would shrivel up and die on their way out. Could Irita hear them prompting her? Obviously, it would be weirder if the Silver King didn't have any kind of super-hearing power by now. Oh goddess, she'd hate her, she'd never want anything to do with some pathetic little puppet again. Irita shifted in her chair, looking directly into the nearest camera. Her eyes narrowed into the faintest beginning of a stern glare. The earpiece cut off abruptly. Okay, Shona said, glancing nervously around the stage. The voice never came back. No one in the audience looked too confused or distraught. Let's talk a little more about that, then, she said experimentally, expecting all the while to be dragged off the stage or struck by lightning or something. For everyone who doesn't know what they want to do yet, how do you find your callings? How do you know you were meant to be a shogi genius, or a keeper? I guess maybe that last one's for the messengers to say, but was there a point when you were sure you'd do it if you could? Irita hummed to herself for a few seconds, tapping her fingers on her wheelchair's armrest. The lightning strike never came. Finally, the Silver King's calm smile widened into what Shona could only see as a conspiratorial grin. This wasn't exactly the kind of interview I was told to prepare for, but it is starting to look like the kind I prefer. All right, Camellia. Let's speak a little more freely, shall we? Shona pumped her fists. She couldn't help it. This was going to be too cool to care who'd yell at her when it was over. So, to be honest, yes, some of this is up to the messengers, Irita began. I don't know what makes someone a keeper. I wouldn't trust anyone who claims to know. I felt that this was where I needed to be for a long time before I met Yoon, so it can't be a simple matter of desire or passion like other callings. Instead, I'd like to talk a bit about the kinds of people I believe should be keepers. To my mind, that's the same as talking about who should want to be keepers. It's a difficult, dangerous, frightening role, and it will become the most important part of your life. There's no avoiding that. If there's something else you were passionate about, you shouldn't expect that being a keeper and having powers connected to that passion will be like doing what you loved, but more. If that lightning was going to strike, now was its last chance. No, it had probably missed its window. No one could stop the Silver King from popping that bubble now. Shona doubted anyone could even bring themselves to try. Like I said before, though, there's some things that can't be done any other way. Every keeper I know has something like that, some change they're determined to make. Every great keeper is someone who's looked at the world and found something they want, more than anything, to change for the better. When people ask me about my favorite keepers, I'm really never thinking about who's the coolest or most popular right now. I think of the saints, who devoted everything they had to making a better world for all of us. And I also think it doesn't always take magic to change the world. Certainly not to change someone's world. The audience was silent. Shona was silent. It was a lot to take in, even for her, especially for her, and for all that she'd invited this, she wasn't sure how to follow it up. When does it not take magic? She finally asked. Almost none of the people who connected every city to the sea were keepers, and who could say what any of this would look like without their work? Irita answered immediately. We protect what all of you build, but it doesn't turn around us. We're just pieces on the board. Major pieces, yes, but I wouldn't be much of anything on my own. Without all the people who help me, I couldn't accomplish anything. And without the people I fight for, nothing I accomplish would matter. So please, whatever you take from this, remember that magic or no, everything you do matters. And to all of you who do make the promise someday, I trust you to do better than Flower's fangs, she finished with a wink to the audience. That got a few laughs. A few more uneasy ones. Honestly, I trust all of you who don't to do that as well. I'm not asking a lot there. Let's not digress too much, though. A little earlier, you asked me when I knew what I was meant to do. Well, I think our time is about actually, our time was up a few minutes ago, Irita finally said, glancing off at a clock on the wall. I guess nobody wanted to interrupt us. Sorry if I've caused any trouble behind the scenes. So, much as I'd love to continue, I wouldn't want to make things any harder for the rest of the shows on your schedule. Yeah, I'd lost track of it myself, thanks for catching me there. She really hadn't been paying attention, but honestly, she'd be happy to dump all those shows for more of this, and so would everyone else. Thank you again for having me on, Camellia. This has been a lovely time. Oh, no, thank you. But I really am coming for you, you know. When you see me again, you'll be the third best Clarish player. Irita laughed, and Shona joined her. I'll look forward to it. And to everyone else watching, whether or not you'll ever be a keeper, whether or not you want to, I think it's good for us all to look around, take in the world, and think, is this right? Should that be the way it is? If you find something that isn't, try to change it. And if you try and find that you just can't, well, maybe you'll meet the messengers one day after all. Thank you all for listening. Irita bowed her head, waved to the crowd, and gestured to the soldiers at her back. The tea server vanished, and his comrade began to wheel the silver general away. And thank you for watching, everyone. I'll be seeing you again real soon. Shona called into the audience with an excited wave, then dashed away. It had been a great interview. Maybe good enough to justify this dumb meta sideshow thing all on its own. Shona wanted to hug whoever'd gotten Irita to agree to it. Sure, some of the geeks in charge of the show's branding or whatever were probably fuming, but everyone else would love it, and then the whole thing would blow over. Backstage, she was greeted by a roomful of wordless glares. Shona flinched, waiting for Mom's sharp language to crack through the air as if she'd said it herself. But Mom only stared at her. Look, this'll be fine, okay? Shona muttered. How many years have we been doing this? Audiences, they grow up with the things they like, yeah. It'll be good for them too. She'd had it all planned out. It all sounded great in her head. But no one here cared what she had to say. They just wanted her to quit ruining everything and go back to being cute. That's not it at all. Please give us a minute, Mom said. She grabbed Shona's arm and dragged her out into the halls. Mom let Shona's arm slip through her fingers once they were away from prying eyes, but didn't turn around to face her. There was a silence as she stared off in the opposite direction, looking down the corridor at a poster with her daughter's face on it spread across the far wall. Shona tried to speak up, to explain herself to the one person who she could trust to understand. She had really done something this time. For once, she had made something wonderful entirely on her own. Mom, do you really hate me that much? She asked, swiveling on her heel. Her whole body shook, and her eyes, already red and watery, had started to well up again. Her makeup ran in messy streams down the side of her face, the kind she'd always rushed to fix the moment she noticed them. What? Shona mumbled. I just can't understand why else you'd be like this. We worked so hard to get you this role. We were all so happy for you when you booked it." Her voice trembled and croaked. "So proud. So why are you doing everything you can to ruin it now?" Shona wrapped a strand of hair around her finger and tugged, trying her best to steady herself. I'm sorry, it's nothing to do with you, okay? Maybe I just don't want to be someone else for the rest of my life." "What do you mean someone else?" Mom forced out through a heaving sob. "Is that how you think about our life's work now? We're only here because you asked to be. You wanted to do what I did, didn't you? And you're an idol now. The whole world loves you. What do you have to be so nasty about?" "Yeah, 'cause you made acting sound really fun when I was 6. There was a kid my age in class who wanted to be a bear when he grew up. I didn't think I was promising to do it forever. I changed. I grew up. Grew up." Mom whispered. Is that all you think of?" Her voice trailed away. A second later, she burst into a wailing weeping fit. The door cracked open behind them. What were they doing back in there, anyway? Worrying about her interview crushing some poor kid's dreams? They really shouldn't be. If Shona hadn't already been desperate to be a real keeper and quit playing a fake one, she was now. She'd just have to find something she wanted to change more than herself. Until then, Maid would listen. If nobody else in the world ever looked at her and saw anything but Camellia, she'd still have one place of shelter. Shona spent the rest of the week at Maid's house. They went to school once, but Aisling really did have her figured out. It wasn't that she didn't have the energy, or she had any problem with how everyone reacted to her awesome metal voice, she just being around all those people, she couldn't help but wonder if all the changes would ever be enough for them to see her as her. So she stayed home after that, and Maid stayed with her. They spent the days walking around the city out of uniform, the nights watching movies and concerts and, on one night Maid blocked out ahead of time, a stream of the yearly fencing championship in Horizon. Shona didn't quite know enough to follow what was happening, but the sheer energy of Maid's commentary on the event was enough to make it fun, like listening to Irita argue about board games. It was a good week, despite everything. It really was. Maid's family was happy enough to have her around that they treated every night as deserving of a big fancy meal for a guest, and while she wouldn't say no to good food with people who actually liked her, she couldn't help but feel like she was imposing. She couldn't exactly ask them to keep her around forever. So finally, that Sunday night, she headed home to face the masked monster who haunted her in her sleep. "Are you sure you don't want me to come in?" Maid asks. "Yup. I need to see how it goes when it's just us. But if you said we should ditch this and go fight with sticks in the park or something instead, I wouldn't complain, you know." Sticks. There's a throwback. Maid smiles a bit wistfully. "I'd like to take you up on that. I don't want to throw you back into the tiger's den. But you did ask me to give you a push if you needed it. So after, okay? Fine. Yeah, okay, you're right. I'm gonna go, then." Maid nods once and squeezes Shona's hand. "All right. If anything goes wrong, I'll be waiting on the road until you give me the go-ahead to leave." "Thanks. Thanks again." Shona takes a deep breath. It whistles electronically even on the way down, "That's kind of fun," strides up her driveway, and unlocks the door. "Been in?" "You're back a little early," Mom's voice calls. Shona grits her teeth, holding back a shudder at the sound, then slams the door behind her. "Oh, now you're slamming the door too? Hasn't the poor thing suffered enough?" Deeper inside, there's the rustle of a magazine being hastily put away, then footsteps from the den tapping her way. As Mom steps into the front hall, Shona smiles and waves. Maid said it would probably be best if people saw her before they heard her. "Oh, finally. There you are." Mom races down the hall, throwing herself into an embrace that makes Shona's entire body seize up. She closes her eyes and focuses on the familiar scent of that amber resin perfume Mom loves. It's not a nice smell, or at least not one that makes her think of nice things, but nothing at all like the Harbinger's rotten trash stink. Her mask couldn't hide that part. I didn't know you'd be back so soon. How are you doing? All better now, I hope. She takes a half step back, resting her hands on Shona's shoulders. And why didn't you answer my calls? Mrs. Lachlan kept me updated, yes, but if you were under the weather, it's my job to, well, do momly things. Worry about you, make you soup, all of that. And if I'd known you'd be back, I would have gotten dinner ready. Under the weather, huh? Yep. That's exactly what it was. Sorry. Didn't want to freak you out, Shona says, keeping her voice as low as she can. Mom gasps and jerks back as if struck. Her eyes glisten like glass as they go wide with Shona can't tell with what. Fear? Disgust? Yeah. See what I mean now? She asks through a bitter smile. Oh, sweetie, no, Mom takes a few seconds to collect herself, then wraps her arms around Shona, squeezing a lot tighter this time. I'm sorry. You could have told me. I know things like this are going to happen sometimes. She buries her face in Shona's shoulder, wiping tears on her sleeve and stifling the pain in her voice. So please don't worry about making me worry, alright? All I want is to be there for you however I can. I'm only sorry I can't have your back the way I used to. Shona bites her lip at that last part, but nods and returns the hug, patting her mom's back. That's fine. Thanks. And, sorry it took so long to check in with you. Mom looks up and grins through her tears. Then keep me in the loop next time. The least you can do is let me fret over you. I'm sure. I'll try, Shona warbles. Anyway. Go ahead and get comfy. Do you need anything? I just bought some of those frozen fruit bars you liked before your accident. They should still be good, if Dad didn't eat them all while you were away. Mom hurries off into the kitchen in search of snacks to throw at her. Shona can't help but smile a little. For a while, a few years ago, Shona had been close with Ailsa, the girl who played Camelia's best friend. They didn't have a ton in common, at first, but what they did have obviously ate up a pretty big chunk of their lives. Mom was one of the first people to notice. She'd insisted on getting Shona help, made every effort to make sure she was eating right, and did everything short of start a public feud with Ailsa's mother. She still didn't want to torch the show, after all. At the time, Shona hated Mom for it the way she hated Mom managing anything about her life, but it was the right thing to do. If she hadn't seen that then, she did by the time Ailsa quit acting and went into treatment, speeding the show along into its downward spiral. As a keeper, Shona pretty much didn't have to worry about nourishment or nutrition as long as she ate enough to live. Immortal bodies running more on magic than anything else apparently took care of that for you, so if she'd still had that problem, she wouldn't anymore. But Mom never quite kicked her habits from those days, when she'd taken every opportunity to find or cook things Shona was willing to eat. Her phone buzzes. There's a message from Ide, reading simply. So far so good, Shona shoots back. Mom is trying. This could have gone a whole lot worse. Nowadays, the food thing is even kind of nice. And it's really not her fault that Lyodane's disgusting monster stalker stole her face. Even if it is her fault that she gave Sariana so much to say. So many old wounds to stick her grimy fingers into. But not raw wounds, no matter how noisily some extra gross harbinger screams about them. They're all just shit that happened years ago. They have nothing to do with her new life. No one can tell her what to do, and she has literally forever for everyone to forget she used to be in a trashy bullshit kids show. This is fine. It'll be fine. Well, he did eat a lot of them. Not the lemon ones, though. That okay? Mom asks, smiling over her shoulder. Guess I'll have to forgive him. The lemon bars have always been her favorite. So, Mom asks while Shona munches away on her glorified popsicle. What have you been up to? Keeping busy, it sounds like. Huh. Oh, yeah. Keeper stuff is, you know. It's a lot sometimes. Anything you'd like to talk about? Shona fidgets with a piece of lemon ice on her tongue while she sorts through her thoughts, throwing all the ones she very much would not like to talk about into a dusty corner. Finally, she swallows and forces a casual smile. I made, a work friend, she offers in the same way she used to talk about girls like Ailsa. Maybe. I think so. Or if not, I'm gonna be her friend whether she likes it or not. Oh, Mom says, straight-faced. There's an odd pause before she continues, oh, that's great. Anyone I would know? Shona shrugs. Doubt it. If you did, I'd be really impressed and she'd be really freaked out. One of those low-profile types. Well, I'm sure I'll have a chance to meet her sooner or later. You always were great at bringing people out of their shells, Mom says, nodding a little too earnestly. Yep. Sure you will, Shona snorts. How'd you find this mystery girl, then? I mean, keeper stuff. How'd you think? Maid and I, showed her the ropes, then she helped me out when I was in trouble. Took a bullet for me was the first phrasing to come to mind, but it wouldn't help either of them to get Mom thinking about how dangerous life as a keeper could actually be. Or how Shona fired that bullet herself. I see, Mom nods. I see. So, about that. Stop me if I'm pestering. You don't need to tell me everything about how you got hurt if you don't want to. But have you been to they have doctors for children in your situation, right? Shona tilts her head, stuffing her remaining half popsicle into her cheek. Yeah. And? I'm doing okay now. Why would I waste their time? Well, I just thought it might be nice to get a professional's idea about recovery, wouldn't it? Maybe they'll know about how long it should take for you to get better. Shona can't help it. She bursts into a fit of distorted laughter. What? Mom says, scowling. Sorry, I just would have taken you for one of those parents who dive the sea and learn every possible thing about what happens when your kid makes the promise, you know? I did, and I really don't see what's so funny. I mean, you're talking about magic like I strained my voice singing or something. Shona cackles. How am I supposed to talk about it when you haven't told me anything? You're clearly still hurt, aren't you? Did one of those monsters do this to you? I can't protect you from everything. Anymore, I know that, but I still need to make sure you're staying healthy. Whatever that means now. Ooh, Shona says, the sound coming out as a low whistle. Now I got it. I'm not hurt, Mom. It's emergence. Same as my cool new eyes. It's not going away, but it's not a problem. I'm not in pain or anything. Mom glances down, wringing her hands. Oh. What? You don't like it? Mom purses her lips very pointedly. 'Cause I do. I think it's great. So you don't need to get all weepy and worry about comforting me. I'm fine. But, thanks. It was a nice thought, Shona adds, the best peace offering she can think of in a hurry. Are you saying you did this yourself? I mean, it's not like I went and got a tattoo. I didn't plan it out or anything. Stuff like this just happens to us over time. And it's really, super not a big deal, okay? Shona fidgets with her popsicle stick between her fingers, holding back the urge to snap it or burn it to dust or do anything but stand here and drown in the shame on Mom's face. Mom smiles beneath wet eyes and reaches out to run a hand along Shona's arm, gently. It feels like a hot iron pressed into her skin. But your real voice has always been so lovely. Everyone loves talking to you. What are they going to think now, she says, visibly fighting back tears all the while. Her voice breaks on the last word. They'll think, wow, there goes one of Clyasia's chosen heroes. Listen to her awesome metal voice, I wish I could sound like that. And if they don't, why should I give half a shit what they think? Shona growls. Shona. Mom gasps, aghast as always, but all she does about it is sigh and shake her head. What about what you think? It doesn't sound healthy, Shona. You know I wouldn't fret like this if things were really okay, but is this really how you want things to be for the rest of your life? Is that how you want to sound on your wedding day? Fine. You're right. I'm sorry, Shona. I'm sorry that the only thing I've ever done is hurt you. Mom wails. She collapses forward, thumping a fist limply into Shona's arm. Shona takes a frantic step back, pushing her away. It's the least, gentlest thing she can possibly do. I'm sorry, I'm not happy to see my sweet little girl dragged out of the life we worked so hard to build and sent off to fight monsters. I'm sorry, I'm not celebrating when you come home hurt. I'm sorry you don't have a good mother who'd wave goodbye with a smile and save a nice spot on the mantle for your ashes. That snarling, tear-streaked face used to tower over Shona. That voice used to fill her nightmares. It has again, since Sariana, only now she sees it scarred, broken, burning. That perfect mask Mom wears until someone pushes her just a little too hard, reduced to piles of lightning-charred flesh over and over and over. And Shona laughs. She throws back her head and laughs and laughs and laughs. Mom stares silently up at her. Her face is twisted, but not in the same old sneering, shameful way. She looks more like she's backing away from an armed intruder. What? You do like that? Is that all you need me for now? She sputters. It doesn't matter, Shona says. What? Mom repeats. Yeah. It really doesn't. I don't have to deal with this shit anymore. I thank the goddess for that every night. Shona steps away, grinning like an idiot, and heads for the door. So I'm gonna go. Bye. No you don't. You're staying right here until we dash. Mom's hand clamps around her wrist and tugs. The words reverberate pleasantly through the room, not shouted, only amplified, not some burst of force to shove her away. But they do their job. Mom's grip loosens. Stumbling footsteps back along the tile floor. Shona doesn't bother looking back. Cool. Have a nice life. She smashes the door violently into its frame on her way out, wipes her eyes, then turns and bolts to the road. Maid, waiting on a bench in the front yard, rushes to join her. Shona, hey, are you? She starts to ask. Her face falls as soon as their eyes meet. Oh, no. What did she do this time? She says if I want to keep running away from the awesome life she built for me to fight monsters, she'll save a nice spot for my ashes. She chokes on the last words. That's pretty much a quote. Maid is silent. Her eyes widen, then quickly narrow as she glances around Shona. Her fists clench at her sides until she sighs, loosens up, and wraps Shona in a gentle hug. Maid flinches at the sudden burst of noise in her ear, but only a little. She nods and squeezes a little tighter. All right. You've got places, okay? Places and people. You don't need to go back there. I'm not. Maybe ever. I don't want to just crash with you guys forever, that's not really fair, so. I dunno. I'll sign up for church housing, I guess. Not sure why I didn't do that earlier. Sure. Yeah. We can figure that out, and you're still welcome for as long as it takes. Seriously, sometimes I think my parents just want to adopt you. Thanks. I don't think I could really ask them that, but it's nice to know, Shona sniffles. I don't want to go back just yet, though. Let's go fight something. Maid tenses up. Hey. Buddy. I get it. I was right there when Aisling said all that stuff. You're looking out for me. Really, thanks. But I've taken the longest break I reasonably can, Kay. Now I need to do something that matters. I don't know if we should right now. N. Hey, do you think that's okay? Maid, please don't make this a whole thing, alright? I'm really not in the mood. Almost instantly, a fluffy pink cloud seal dives up from beneath the driveway as if it were the surface of the ocean, does an awkward little wiggle twirl in midair, and plops into the grass on his stomach. Hello, really not in the mood. I'm N. Huh. Shona mumbles. What? I am. See. The messenger silently thumps a flipper paw to his chest in emphasis. Maid folds her arms, smiling wearily. Where'd the dad joke come from? Do you guys even have a dad? She asks. I mean, no, but I know lots of kids who do. One of my other friends always laughs when I do those, and it's real hard getting her to laugh. He shakes himself out and balances on his stubby tail, proudly puffing up his fur. Can I help you two with anything? Advice? Cuddles? Think we're good, thanks, Shona answers. Shona's spontaneous emergence thing, Maid says at the same time. Is it safe for her to get back to keep her stuff yet? N hop scoots up to Shona, bonking his nose into her foot. Oh yeah. How's that been? How are you feeling, Shona? Shona meets his bright, beady eyes with a sideways smile. I mean. Magic-wise? Pretty much fine. It's been like a week, I haven't done anything active, I feel pretty much the same. Not that I really felt different in the first place. Emichem. N nods eagerly. You usually don't when it goes like that, I think. So, is there like, a test? Something she can do or you can do to see if she's back where she needs to be yet? He flops to the ground, doing a few little rolls back and forth with a flipper pressed to the chin he doesn't have. Okay. Here's what we do. Shona, I need you to put me on your head, alright? Can I even actually pick you up? We go through this every time. It's fine, it's fine. Just take it slow. With a shrug, Shona scoops N up and doesn't so much lift him as wave him upward. It feels more like directing a puff of warm air than holding an animal. It takes a bit, but soon he's settled on top of her. He crawls through her hair and down her back, poking and mouthing her at random, making little noises like a kitten excited for dinner between ethereal, tickly touches, then squirms around her side and into her arms, spreading his flippers wide as if asking for a hug. So what exactly was that for? Nothing, really. I just wanted cuddles. He giggles, nuzzling into her. I tricked you. Shona snorts out a low, gritty, involuntary laugh. See? I got you. I could see you weren't feeling so great, so I had to get you. Clap 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 for me. And moves to give himself a round of applause, but his tiny flippers don't quite reach each other. Sure. Good job, lil guy. Maid shoots them both an uncertain look. So, oh, the test. I don't think that's a thing. Sorry, Maid. And admits with a sheepish scratch of his cheek. But if it helps, I think you should be fine. That whole thing is mostly just about when things get weird with your power, you don't want to jump right into it and push it to get weirder, you know? I mean, unless that is what you want to do, that's fine too. But for my kids it usually isn't. So as long as you've had some time to calm down, some distance from the thing that stretched it out in the first place, you get a clean bill of health from Dr. N. Shona grins. Good doggy. See, Maid? N wriggles in mock protest. I'm not a doggy. I'm an N. Well. Alright, then, Maid says with a shrug, smiling at the little guy despite herself. If he's sure, and you think that's what'll help most, you know I have your back, Shona. Thanks, Shona says, as gently as she can. And thanks, N. We're gonna go blow up a harbinger, K. Good luck. N cheers. He hops out of Shona's arms, waves once more in midair, then pops out of being before he hits the ground. So, Shona says, throwing an arm around Maid's shoulder. Wanna see if you can find anything interesting? I know I'm dragging you along, so you get first pick. Sure. When you pick it usually turns out like the bathroom ghost incident or something, anyway. Maid pulls her phone from a skirt pocket and starts tapping away. Okay, let's see. Oh. Whoa. Shona cranes down to peek at Maid's screen. I didn't even make it to flow. There's a lighthouse alert. Someone on the west edge of town found, a hole in the planet filled with crawling, limbless things. That's what it says. Who? Is this a call for backup? Doesn't say. Just some guy. They found him screaming about it not too far from the place it's supposed to be. And he saw it and just ran off. Lucky guy. Seriously. So, that sound alright? Shona pounds a fist into an open palm. Look, all I want right now is to find some big, horrible thing and blast it. That sounds perfect. And if someone else shows up for the alert, awesome. Can't be any more of a mess than our last team up. So off they go, leaving Shona's once home behind. Good riddance. Before too long, they put the map away, instead simply following the tuneless alien song pricking at Shona's ears in the distance. Shona's always thought that the best way to understand someone is to listen to their music. Is it violent? Does it scream out against something? Music is meant to share some idea or emotion that's too big to fit into words. If you know which songs speak to someone the most, you can get a really good feel for what they're thinking and how they'll act. So of course, where so many other keepers feel magic as something separate from the world and their body's senses, Shona hears it. Irida is a grand marching tune keeping time for a perfectly synchronized army. Roland is a rock orchestra that shifts instruments and tones, from mellow and subtle to an epic wall of sound, to match the moment. Aisling is a symphony missing a few key notes to be the way it should. Lyodane is a doleful dirge so quiet that it feels like it wouldn't exist at all if it wasn't making someone listen. Actually, a lot of souls feel like they're missing something, which kinda makes sense. Magic grants wishes that can't come true any other way, right? Not her magic, of course. All Shona wanted from the promise was the new life she already has. Anything else is just a cool bonus. When Shona first hears this harbinger's voice, the only comparison she can think of is to a dark, soppy cave. Drops of water falling like unsteady drumbeats in a dank, echoing chamber. As she follows it back toward its source, the sound is occasionally interrupted by strange atonal pulses of unidentifiable noise. Some are brief bloops or insect-like chitters, others long and low, like synthesized electronic perversions of whale song. That last idea is the one that sticks in Shona's mind, especially when, as they come closer to the sound source, she starts to hear it in the distance from every direction at once. It makes her think of giant space creatures screaming mismatched phrases of song through the dark, calling out for others like themselves, but finding nothing. But she found it, and she'll feel a lot better after she shuts it up. By the time they arrive, emergency alerts have gone out to everyone in the area, and first responders have already started evacuating the surroundings. Shona and Maid have plenty of experience navigating through that kind of chaos in the opposite direction, though. The alien song leads to a parking garage at the edge of the northern business district, of all places. Just outside its entrance, Shona halts herself and restores friction to her shoes, Maid skidding to a stop right behind her. She listens through the flood of chaotic noise for any signs of other keepers, but there's nothing to accompany the harbinger's deep, murmuring ambience. Either it's just her and Maid here with their enemy, or whoever got here first is already inside. Does it say if there's anyone else incoming? Shona asks. Irita knows, Maid says immediately. She'll be here soon as she can. Whoa. Big guns, huh? Guess this is pretty close to her neck of the woods. Hold on, how do you know that already? Maid shoots her a blank-faced look. I checked. Dude, were you on Lighthouse while we raced here? Texting and zooming super dangerous, you know. Shona leans over to elbow Maid's side, but her arm thunks harmlessly into the shorter girl's breastplate. Maid grins wryly up at her. Yeah, well, I've had a lot of practice. Gotta stay sharp with the one thing I'm better at than you. It's not the only thing, dummy. You could suplex me into the dirt any day. I mean, you know what I mean. Maid looks away, back through the garage's entrance. It's dark in there, save for the dim twilight sun flooding in from outside. So. Unless you want to wait for backup, and I don't think we could do much to help Irita, should we check the place out? Yeah. Imagine if we steal her thunder for once, wouldn't that be awesome? Maid glances back over her shoulder, smiling uncertainly. Just don't go too crazy, okay? Sure. If we get a few good hits in and then she saves the day, I can live with that. Phew. They, meant a hole in the planet, literally, huh? Is that even surprising at this point? Maid says, her voice iced over in a way that tells Shona she's put her guard up. The knight takes a few measured steps toward the edge, craning her neck for a better view. More importantly, how has this place not collapsed? This looks like it should have eaten through the foundations. And where are those crawling things? Shona shrugs. Inside. Maid doesn't take her eyes off the pit, but shakes her head just enough for Shona to see it. Then how'd the guy who got away see them? Oh. Good point. Shona looks around again, listening for anything out of place other than the giant screaming hole in the world, but finds nothing. Shit. You didn't see anything weird on the way here, did you? If I did, I'd have stopped and zapped M. Wanna go sweep the place again? Not really. It looked like they've been clearing this place out for a while. If something was out here that normal people could see, I'm sure it's run off by now too. Maid chews her lower lip thoughtfully. I just have a bit of a bad feeling. Could you stand guard for a second? Sure. Maid unsummons her weapons, backs off, and starts tapping on her phone. Despite being plate armor rather than a fancy outfit or cool cloak, Maid's regalia still has the typical magic pockets, a little tactical pouch that's bigger on the inside strapped to her right hip. So cool. Experimentally, Shona conjures a violin bow and hucks it into the pit, where it vanishes into the dark without a sound. No surprise there. So, what kind of feeling? She asks her partner. I was just thinking about the survivor and those limbless things he mentioned. There's no monsters out here, no monsters anyone on Lighthouse is reporting yet. So what if he was in the wound? Shona frowns. Then he'd still be in there, yeah. Doesn't look like the sort of place a normal guy could just walk out of. Yeah, Maid agrees. Unless the Harbinger let him out for some reason. Oh, shit, Shona mutters. Like what? Don't know. It's only a feeling. Could be nothing. Maybe the monsters just scattered and hid somewhere. But I asked them to make sure he's in a secure part of the sanctuary, just in case. Maid tucks her phone away. Her shield shimmers back into being. Ha. Yeah, good call. Maid talked all the time as if she wasn't useful just because her magic wasn't that flashy. But that didn't mean it wasn't cool or wasn't good, and more than that, she thought of stuff that Shona just didn't. Got it all taken care of? As much as I can, yeah. Wanna see what's down there? Yup. Here's to no witches, no bullshit head games, just some big dumb monster the city needs saving from. Woo! Shona cheers. Maid raises a gauntlet fist, smiling in wordless agreement. She calls her spear into her free hand, holds her breath, and leaps into the hole. Shona hops in after her with a twirl, spinning and spinning in place as she falls. A few seconds into the fall, the darkness behind the world is entirely enveloped by the overgrowth of those shimmering roots. An endless tunnel formed from massive tangled clumps of creeping white rope, like a well made of spiderwebs all smushed up into building material. The pair ready themselves for any sudden movements. A harbinger usually noticed when others entered their home, and it wasn't that unusual for them to set up a trap or lash out and attack the instant the invader arrived. But nothing like that happens when they reach the bottom. Shona spots dim lights mingling in the dark below, the web roots give way again to darkness, and then the pit dumps them out into the void. Shona touches down weightlessly on a vast, rugged surface of dark gray stone. Solid earth like the face of a barren mountain stretches out in every direction. Maid has already found her footing, taken up a defensive stance, and started looking around. There is only dust and pebbles and boulders littered amidst the jagged, parched landscape, which curves slightly downward at its far edges the way the distant ocean appears to melt into the horizon. The sky, though the black sky above is filled with more stars than the brightest night, all twirling and dancing through the dark. They trail rainbows of phosphorescent stardust behind them and gather into groups as they move, orbiting tightly around each other until they start to seem less like stars and more like giant clouds of light filtered through a haze of twinkling dust. They remind Shona of a time she went camping overnight with Maid's family. There was a great celestial cloud in the sky that night, growing ever larger as if it was descending to the earth. Weird stellar displays on that scale were rare, but some people, including Maid's dad, like to go out and hold viewing parties, watching whatever strange things they do through telescopes and waiting for the way they always ended the solar flare that cut through the night, casting the world in a sudden blinding flash of daylight for just a few seconds. The sun smote the would-be invader and moved on as quickly as it appeared, leaving its remains to burn through the sky like a shower of divine fireworks. It was beautiful. If they were anywhere else, if 100 voices weren't still screaming their tuneless, desynchronized songs from beneath the earth, this sky might be, too. Then Shona watches one rip itself apart, suddenly and violently enough that the stars composing it splinter into smaller, mangled points of light and limp off into the void, seeking new partners to begin the dance all over again. What is this? Maid whispers, eyes wide. A giant rock just floating its way through the stars. Is that, like, a thing? I mean, maybe. Could be something our guy here dreamed up. You know. A symbolic rock. Symbolic of what, Shona? Buddy, if you wanted to know that, we should have brought Aisling again. I just blow stuff up. Speaking of, judging by the noise, it seems like the thing's underneath us. Inside the rock, in a cave or burrow or something. Wanna go find a way down or should I just break stuff until it comes out? Maid mumbles. If we smash this thing badly enough that there's no ground left, I'm not sure how I'd navigate through whatever this is. This night sky knockoff. She jumps in place experimentally, maybe testing if there's some weird trait of the wound that would let her propel herself through the sky, but only reaches a little more than her normal height. Yeah. Let's try the first way. Suit yourself. Lead on, then. Shona summons her violin and begins to play, filling the wound with her power. Red lightning courses through the sky overhead, not quite reaching the celestial scenery above. Maid scouts ahead, steadily and carefully as ever, always staying close enough that she could leap back to protect Shona in an instant. Hey, look here, Maid calls, maybe a minute's walk from where they started. It's not all rock. She scrapes at the ground with her foot, exposing a cluster of those white roots just below the surface. They'd be hard to see if it weren't for the pale light they gave off. Shona lowers her violin and leans down to inspect the roots at a healthy distance. Ha! It's not doing anything weird, is it? Maid readies her spear, pointing it straight at the cluster. Then she scuffs it a few more times, raises her leg, and gives it a hefty stomp for good measure. Nothing seems to happen. Not unless you're hearing anything weird, she says. No weirder than before. Still just the same shitty noise. Well, it does sort of trail away from here. Maybe it goes somewhere important. Sure, let's see. Everything around us just looks like more rocks. They follow the roots for a few more minutes. It's slow going, with Maid stopping to scrape away more of the rocks covering them every few steps, and at no point does anything else about the wound change. If it weren't for the Harbinger's voice, they'd just be drifting through the sky on a big weird rock. But that's fine with Shona. Static hangs heavy in the air around her, eager as it's ever been to spring to life and push back those discordant voices with her own brand of noise. The longer and louder she plays uninterrupted, the worse it'll be for this thing when it finally decides to show itself. Eventually, the ground ahead of them slopes down and opens up, forming the mouth of an underground tunnel. The root lights trail off into the dark, like a path through a cave system marked in fluorescent paint. Don't like that, Shona says, thinking of those fish with the spooky lantern lures. Yeah, me neither, Maid sighs. But it's a lead. Unless you want to just keep exploring the rock. Nah. We can handle it. Maid nods and raises her shield. Just stay on guard in case anything jump scares us, okay? It looks narrow enough for me to hold, but you never know how space will work in these things. The knight starts into the tunnel, spear at the ready, and Shona follows. There's a confusing odor in the underground, not quite like anything Shona's smelled before. Wet, earthy, musty, but also vaguely organic. It's unpleasant, but not exactly offensive, not the way she'd expect a harbinger to smell. Especially after Sariana. Nothing jump scares them while they descend, though kind of the opposite, actually. Eventually, the tunnel starts to flatten out, and in the distance, its mouth opens into a larger, slightly brighter cavern. Maid stops abruptly, takes a long step back, and elbows Shona. There, she says softly, pointing to something. Shona lowers her violin bow and squints into the cave. Just ahead, barely visible in the light of the pale strands running through the ground around it, there's something squirming along. A plump, squirmy worm with flesh the toxic, washed-out green-on-gray of coughed-up phlegm. Its head is split into a messy tangle of thin, meaty branches. It probably already heard us on the way down, Shona says as quietly as she can. If it did, it doesn't seem to care. Sure enough, it's not crawling toward them, not even looking their way with the eyes it doesn't have. It's just sort of blorping along. Weird. Want me to blast it? Be ready for that, but not yet. Let's see how far we can make it doing this the quiet way. Maid draws her right arm back, steadying her spear for a javelin throw. Then, in the same motion, she lunges forward and hurls it at the worm's head, impaling it to the rocky ground. Its lower body wriggles uselessly for a few beats, the last of its strength slowly fading, then falls still. Shona suppresses an urge to whistle. Maid beckons her forward, summons a sword in her weapon hand, and strides into the cavern, scooting around the worm's corpse and keeping close to the cave's walls. It certainly isn't bright in here, but it is surprisingly well lit. Less like an underground tomb should look, more like the night beneath a full moon. Some of that comes from the roots running all through the ground, but as the cave's walls stretch up and up with no end in sight, Shona follows them to the ceiling, where the many-colored stars of a bizarre sky just like the one outside dance, gather, and destroy themselves in the exact same pattern. And in the cavern itself a rocky grove spotted with all kinds of unrecognizable plants and strangely colored mushrooms are too many shapeless, wriggling monsters to count. Formless oozes, fleshy flowers using their wide, flat petals as limbs, airborne living balloons floating along like jellyfish with shining white roots trailing from their lower halves, things like wobbly sea urchins with dozens of tentacles but no bodies, all of these things, not a single one of which looks like it should live, let alone move, crawling wherever they please. For a second, all Shona can do is stare. When she comes to her senses, Maid is already surveying the terrain. We can fight them out here if it comes to that. Normally I'd go for the choke point, but I still don't trust the walls here, and we should be faster, she whispers. Gotcha. Any ideas what I should worry about, if we start blasting here? Shona's yet to see two of these monsters that look exactly alike, but those split-headed eelworms seem to be the most common, basic type. Most of them are gathered in the center of the chamber, climbing over what looks like the half-rotted remains of a giant tree or maybe a few trees, wrapped in a shroud of moss and mold. Maybe that big clump over there. Seems good. Nothing else looks important yet. Maid approaches the tree mound, step by careful step. Shona watches her back, ready to pick up her song and bring on a raging storm at a second's notice. Until a limb shoots out from under a patch of fungus, wraps around Maid's leg, and squeezes, clinging to her with all its might. She yelps in shock and turns on it, first trying to kick through its grip, then swiping at it with her sword, severing it in one clean cut. It has more of a shape than the oozy tentacles all around them. It looks like a human arm, only there's no blood or bone at its stump, only a torn mess of white roots. The thing it was attached to staggers upright. It's roughly human-shaped, but with one extra arm growing from its side and one formless stalk across from that arm, like a plant in the middle of sprouting. Its corpse-gray skin is mostly covered in tiny flat mushrooms like scales, and its head and chest are split in two places, as if its skin was just a bag tearing open to expose its insides. One fissure tears straight down its face, splitting its head into two flaps loosely connected by stringy white threads, while another runs from one side of its neck all the way down its torso. Its bright, bulging eyes swivel toward the halves of its severed arm, moving separately to stare at both the stump of its shoulder and its fallen limb. Then, without any warning, it lunges for Maid again. The way it moves makes no sense. It's like it's not moving on its own power, if it even could, but being pushed along by something inside it, something straining to get out. Maid checks it with her shield, meeting its strike with full body force and bashing it back into the growth it rose from. Shona raises her violin and puts her bow to its bridge, filling the cavern with music. Lightning arcs through the air around her, dyeing the gloom in sweet magenta light. But just before she wills her storm to incinerate the monster, there's a voice. From the throat of the twisted figure in front of her emerges a low, wet rasp, less like a voice and more like the sound a pile of wet leaves makes when you fall in it. Wait, no, hurts, where's what are we, it groans. Shona stops playing. It's speaking Clarish, she realizes with a pit in her stomach. Maid sees it too. She holds her sword still, its tip hovering right over the place where the thing's ribs would be, then banishes it, clapping her hand over her mouth. She looks like she's about to puke. Shona, these I think this is. It was, a person, she croaks. Can you feel them? Hear them? Is there anything left in there? Shona listens, straining her soul's ears as hard as she can. There are keepers who can sense normal people with their power, but she's never been one of them. She only hears magic, and right now, all she can hear is the thudding of her own heart and the endless low wails of the Harbinger's distant voices. Shona shakes her head slowly. And no, I'm sorry. I can't. There's rustling in the plants. Writhing monsters crawling toward them, drawn by the commotion. And more human shapes lurching through the dark like Sophia the Deathless walking corpses. At least 3 of them. Maid balls her free hand into a tight fist, then unclenches it and recalls her sword. Fine. That's fine, okay, we don't need to take care of them right now. Keep moving, be careful with them. We kill the Harbinger, and if they're real people, they'll be outside when the wound collapses. Okay. That thing in the middle. Maid inclines her head at the dead tree mound. Think that's it? Want to fry it? From this distance, the broken trunks seem to form the rough shape of a big, stocky animal's corpse, with the shattered remains of broad arms spiked with sharpened branches and a flat, mold-coated faceplate. The worms crawling along it almost look like they're in the middle of performing some disgusting operation, using their tentacles like wire cutters to slice chunks of rotted wood away and clear space for some slimy blob to crawl in and nest in the cavities. Do I? Shona plays a bar of sharp, shrieking noise, a sound even she could hardly call music. The ambient power clinging to her gathers itself into a storm of righteous rage, rips through the wound, and crashes into the tree thing with a satisfying peal of thunder that drowns out the harbinger's cries, if only for a moment. The first strikes incinerate dozens of crawling worms at once. A second round tears into the rotting heap, burning away huge chunks of its moldy shroud and setting the wood ablaze. As the first fire catches, the tree creature answers Shona's noise with a wet, gurgling parody of a fierce roar, one that sounds as much like a strangled scream of impossible pain as a battle cry. It lurches to life, the things oozing through it serving both as muscles and glue, straining to hold its broken body together. Fungal stalks bulge through cracks in the flattish stretch of wood that seems to be its face, sprouting at their ends into lidless white eyes. Its arms dig into the ground, each impact sending the wound shuddering like a tiny earthquake, and drag it clumsily along, carrying it forward as fast as they can. Beneath the mold, it has no lower body at all, its torso simply trails away into a stringy white mass strewn with bits of gravel and dead wood. And all around them, following its lead, the smaller mold things begin to slowly swarm, some gathering around the tree while others rush straight at the invaders. Maid races ahead to block the tree's advance. Trailing right behind her, Shona begins a new song, channeling its power into her guardian knight. Maid's shield and sword crackle as she meets the harbinger's charge head-on, deflecting its first blow with a clanging sweep of her shield that sends its arm flailing back so hard and fast it looks like it should have been pulled from its socket. Shona removes the friction from her feet and darts away from Maid. This rough, messy surface isn't at all ideal, but that's only a small obstacle. She skates on the sea, a few rocks and twisty roots won't stop her. She gathers a ring of lightning around herself and glides through the gathering horde, cutting a burning swathe through worms and slimes and bodiless starfish well before they can come to the tree's aid. Her waltz of death through the monster's swarming pets spans a few laps through the wound. Her bow dances across the strings of her violin along with her, gathering ever more power in her storm, never troubled enough by the monstrosities throwing themselves at her to miss a note. Finally, she turns back to Maid, still holding her own against the tree harbinger in the center of the cavern, and expels her gathered storm into its flank in a furious barrage of spiraling bolts. The strike bowls the great decayed beast over with the force of a burning truck, and Maid is quick to follow up, carving a parting slash through one of its limbs, but a fresh group of monsters lunges at her before she can press the attack. No, these ones aren't monsters, not completely. They're the other victims, each split and broken and deformed in their own horrible way. They shouldn't hurt her, not the way they're fighting now, not by hurling themselves at Maid over and over like human shields. But the time she spends fending them off, shoving them away without hurting them any more than they've already been hurt, that's a problem. The harbinger writes itself. Between a blocked blow and a hastily dodged tackle, it lashes out at Maid with a surprising burst of speed. Its limb slams into her, sending her skidding violently through the rocks. She picks herself up, wipes the blood from her scraped face, and holds her shield against the victims rushing to drag her back down, but that clearly hurt. Shona's fingers clench around her bow, squeezing it tightly enough that it feels like it should splinter beneath her grasp. And right now, as she fixes her grip and pours her fury into her music, flooding this horrible world with storm and song, she couldn't wipe the manic grin from her face if she tried. Crimson lightning falls from the cavern's indoor stars, forks of it dancing in the dark and converging on the harbinger from all directions. The lightning doesn't fade when it strikes, each bolt stabs into its body and stays there, channeling the wrath of the heavens straight into its core. Twisting snakes of crackling radiance set its insides aflame like a broken lantern and cook the mold creatures inhabiting it from the inside out. Slimy limbs bubble up through cracks in its dead bark, which start to splinter and pop off until the monster practically bursts. All around the wound, the remaining eyeless faces and the people, to Shona's relief, turn to stare at its burnt husk, as if they aren't quite sure what to do next. And a bulbous egg-sac orb of white flesh falls from the tree thing's shattered torso, pulsing on the inside with points of familiar black light. Its heart. That really was the harbinger, then. Yeah. I'll be okay. She winces as she smiles, but holds the expression anyway. Shona, that was awesome. I know. You were pretty great too. So go on, eat up. You've earned it. She claps a hand on Maid's back, gently as she can when she's so excited. Maid fixes her gaze on the heart and wrinkles her nose. Do I have to? I mean, no. I could do it. But I want you to have it. Alright, Maid sighs. I guess this is probably the grossest they'll ever get, at least. Dude. That's what we call tempting fate. Just eat it already. Ugh, you're right. Yeah, fine, here I go. But this is my limit. If we do find a worse one, you're doing it. Maid limps forward, uninterrupted, and puts a hand to the heart. Her face twists up as its power starts to flow into her, then relaxes into the heady haze of taking in a harbinger's soul. As the dark lights in the heart fade, it deflates, leaving behind an empty sack of translucent skin. You. But when it's gone, the harbinger's many songs in the distance carry right on. Huh? How? Maid. Hey. That wasn't it, Shona hisses. Huh? Maid shakes herself out of her absorption trance at Shona's urging. What do you mean? It was the heart, it's gone now, and yeah, why is all this still here? In answer, those screaming, singing voices speak as if right into her ears. Too many voices to count, but out of sync with each other to the point where they sound more like the nonsense noise of a shouting crowd than a unified chorus. The harbinger's attention falls on her like the weight of the sky. Rough, lumpy faces sprout from the fungal growths all along the walls, staring straight down at her with bulging blue-white orbs. I am. You. There is no you. There is no me. Nana Ash. Moving as one in a blur too fast to follow, too many hair-thin white strands to count rise from the wound, encircle Shona, and bore into her skin. Searing, screaming, tearing pain sets her world on fire as they burrow through her eyes, growing into her flesh as she's dragged down, down, splitting, filling her everything with it. In seconds, nothing else remains. But she still feels. Only the agony, those seconds of torture stretching and stretching on forever, but still she feels without skin. There's still a her to feel it. There's still a her to see without eyes. There's still a her. There's still a her. There's still a her. Shona sees her own body, stuffed like a skin sack full of reeds and eaten from inside out by fungal roots. Maid's panicked, tear-streaked face as she hacks away at the cocoon, its threads shifting and regrowing to replace themselves in instants. Not that there's anything left of her in there. But her magic isn't part of her body. It's her. And as long as there's a her, she can keep fighting. She looks inside and sees her power, her desperate rage, a flickering ember drowned at the bottom of a sea of impossible pain. She shuts the wound and the agony and everything out, focusing only on that single, beautiful ember. And she screams, making a song of that endless, breathless shriek, pouring everything she's ever thought and felt and been into the sound. It burns and burns until it boils the whole sea around her away and keeps burning. It pours out into the wound, destroying what's left of her cocoon corpse, turning every squirming little monster to ash at once, striking back at the stars themselves. She lashes out at everything, pushing to disintegrate the wound and its master and everything it is. There's nothing left to hold her back, nothing that could hold back a living storm of boundless fury, a tempest of pure power who can write whatever she wants into the world in flame. No, there's still one thing. Still Maid, staring up at her as she rises. She sends a bolt of herself back to the surface and slices through the wound itself, burning away a circle of everything around Maid and leaving her a tiny severed island to fall back to reality on. I'm sorry I was such an idiot. Thanks for going along with me, she tries to say. But she doesn't know how anymore. Through all the devastation, something unreal stares down at her. A shapeless gray ink blot of a face among the stars. It changes itself as her new senses take it in, becoming a half-formed outline of her own features. Interesting, it says, in her voice, and so many more. Its roots rise and shift at an impossible angle, digging into her once again. And then it swallows her soul, too. Maid collapses on hard, paved ground and springs to her feet, glancing in a frantic circle. She's back outside the wound, the pit right behind her. What happened? That scarlet storm angel did something to her, flooded her whole world with blinding red light, and by the time the spots faded from her eyes, she was here. Not important. Shona's still in there. She needs to get back. She raises her sword, and where'd it go? Whatever. She'll just summon a new one. Nothing happens. What? She gasps, looking down at her hand. Her armor's gone too. All she sees is her own scratched skin and torn sleeve. She reaches out for her magic, calls to it, screams in her mind that they need to transform again right now. But there's nothing. Her power, for whatever it was worth, is gone from her reach. How? Why? Why now? Shona. Shona, she wails into the dark. Is anyone here yet? Help. Help us. No one answers. No one comes. Tears sting the cuts on her cheek. And as she stares back into the hole, struggling to find the will to move, to find help, to do anything but stand here and be pulled back into the dark, to go where Shona is, something reaches a nubby, oozing limb out from the mouth of the pit. Something like a starfish with no central body, just a fanged, tentacled halo mottled with colors that don't exist. Maid stumbles back, her breath catching in her throat. What can she do? What has she ever been able to do? The thing crawls out of the hole, dragging itself toward her. It wraps a leg around her ankle, draws itself up, and narrows its mouthless ring of teeth around her. Until a tiny glint of steel slices through the air, as if swung from nowhere by an invisible wielder swinging an invisible weapon, even, with only the smallest triangle point of metal visible, and then that disappears too. In its passing, the starfish collapses into two halves, cut down the middle at an odd angle, and becomes nothing but two tangles of dead flesh at her feet. Maid whirls around, glancing over her shoulder just in time to see someone grab her arm. A tall, slender-necked girl in a sleek gray suit, her face entirely covered by a single plate of metal. In her free hand, she brandishes a little orange box cutter. Come on, the girl commands, tugging Maid back. And before she can protest, she's dragged out of the garage in a single long stride, compressed into a half-second of motion. Shona floats through an endless abyss. There's nothing but distant stars and pain, the memory of pain so hot and bright it refuses to leave her even now. She couldn't say how long she's been there. Part of her wonders if there's ever been anything else. But eventually, something happens. Shapes form in the darkness. Faces, the vague forms of faces, some almost human and some unthinkably other, but none with enough visible features to be called an actual face. All are shaped from colorful blooms of mold like unfinished clay sculptures. We know it hurts. We remember your suffering, your terror, we have felt it so many times. It will pass. It will sink into you as you sink into us. You will stabilize. What? What is this? Where is she? What does that mean? We have learned that there is no value in spoken communication with you. You keep too many of your true thoughts beneath your context, where we cannot taste them. It is less painful for us all when we subsume your shells as quickly as possible. Pain makes way for other memories, other feelings. Regret and longing and the raw animal terror of being devoured alive. Do you still fear us? So do we. This is not the way we wish to be. But it is the way we are. The sadness in its voices feels familiar. It feels like something Shona can't help but understand. We are not who we are, not anymore. Are you who you are? What is it like to be you? Taste yourself with my context as I see myself with your eyes. Is there still a me? Can there ever be again? We can learn from each other, while you are still you. Is she still her? How would she know? Her thoughts spin and find only one anchor, one reminder that there was a world before this. Maid isn't here. Maid will be safe. She has to be. She didn't drag her into this just to get her killed. Maid. What is Maid? Memories spill out from what's left of her mind and float through the void as if they were real things, keepsakes slipping from her grasp. Days spent together in the deep woods, or wandering the quiet corners of the city. Sparring with sticks in the park, just because. Maid always won, but Shona never stopped smiling at the thought that someone might recognize her and see her like that. The promise they made together. Or the one she made for Maid. That's probably how it always was. She probably always knew, somewhere deep down. We see. You have lost yourself as well. Teach us. What would it mean to find yourself? Do you know? How many more, it will take to make one, me? The most traditional version of this card depicts a twilight lake in a colorful ethereal landscape. A vast dark hole has opened in the water, around which the world twists and spins as if being pulled down through a drain. A single human figure swirls an arm at the water's edge, and from the center of the darkness, the shadowed form of the undreaming a dark figure on a dark background, only her eyes of violet fire clearly visible reaches out to take their hand. The goddess's wayward daughter, who loved the world too much to cope with all the sorrow in it, calls to those of us who stand at the brink of losing ourselves to despair. In tarot, we view the undreaming not as an external force whose nightmares invade our hearts, but as a reflection of our own inner darkness. When this card appears in your readings, it carries an urgent warning which must be interpreted with courage and candor. You need to search your own inner world and consider what dark thoughts or self-destructive patterns may be pulling you down. Harbingers are often said to be drawn into the world by our emotions and mental states. While we cannot control them, we can come to understand ourselves and overcome our pain for its own sake. Returning to the card's image, we see that the undreaming is entirely confined to the void, trapped within her own pain, and beyond her reach, the beauty in the world stands unchanged. The sun will shine again tomorrow, even over the darkest places. As always, despite its ominous connotations, it bears mentioning that no tarot card is purely sinister. Positive aspects of the undreaming may include becoming aware that you have a problem, the first step in seeking help, or a suggestion to take a deeper look at someone we consider to be wicked. They may simply be in pain, or perhaps the traits we most hate in others might cast a light on our own flaws, serving as a mirror to show us where we need to improve. When inverted, we may imagine the scene flowing in the opposite direction, banishing the hungry blackness, but inversions are rarely so simple. Rather than pure inner peace, the undreaming inverted may represent overcoming trauma or recognizing and escaping from abuse or self-sabotage. By the same token, it may indicate denial of a painful emotion, or perhaps a dark impulse or dangerous tendency you may be resisting or burying from conscious awareness. While this is perhaps the card most feared by amateurs and K-Rents, it almost never refers directly to harbingers or their activity in any sense beyond lingering trauma caused by an attack. It is unethical and dangerous for a tarot reader to predict harbinger incidents. Keywords: upright, nightmares, mental illness, regret, hopelessness and helplessness, lost causes, self-destruction. Inverted, plus, confronting inner demons, near escapes from tragedy, positive thinking. Denial, refusal to face a problem, intrusive thoughts, suppressed desires. The too familiar sensation of my joints trying to eat themselves gnaws me awake just before sunrise. I wince and bury my face in Pearl's side, hiding from the light. It hurts to move, it hurts anyway, moving just makes it hurt more. It's like tiny bits of muscle and tissue inside me have frozen into shards, snapping under the pressure if I try to move at all. Of course it's today, too. Of course. I've gotten too used to being able to ignore a bad health day if I just throw enough stolen life at it. It's only natural that everything would go wrong today, now that the wells run dry and I have no idea how long it'll take me to set up some less awful method of getting more. If that's still possible. If it was ever more than a stupid fantasy to imagine that random people would just hand me enough of themselves to keep me on my feet. But no one burst through my window and killed me in my sleep. Yet. So I guess that's something nice. I almost want to go back to sleep, to pause the start of the next terrible day for just a little longer, but I almost never can sleep on mornings like this, and I certainly couldn't after last night. Instead, I force myself to sit up, wincing at every tiny adjustment, and transform still mostly under the covers, which I'm sure would mortify everyone who thinks keepers need weird poses and catchphrases. That's kind of a nice thought, too. If I had magic back when I wrote that gratitude journal where I thanked my skin for keeping my organs in place and my organs for doing their best against my blood's constant onslaught, that project might have lasted for more than a day. So while I'm searching for any reasons not to dissolve into a puddle of pain and panic, let's take stock of what I got from the longest, most exhausting day of my life. So far. I can't exactly count decent relationships with other keepers after the last thing, but Sariana is absolutely dead. I've only touched the blessed curse she left me on instinct, in a moment of desperate inspiration. What can it actually do? I fill a card with a roughly me-sized wisp of death mist and float it across the room. I transfer my vision into it, both eyes this time, just to make sure I can then will it to burst, quickly shaping its fumes into a new doppelganger. Peering out through a ragged curtain of ink-stained white hair that parts just enough for me to see, I peer into the dresser mirror at the twisted echo of myself, a little thinner, a little more see-through than the last. I raise one skeletal hand, clenching and unclenching its translucent skin. It hurts a little, the way pushing through the cold, numb pain of doing anything on a bad health day always does, but not enough to stop me from doing it. With a bit of effort, I can make this, me, at least solid enough to walk around and touch surfaces rather than simply drift like foul air, but I can't quite find the strength to crack the window open, and the pain of trying overlays itself with my real body's sharp pangs in a confusing double vision way. I try to sigh, but no sound comes out. Neither do any others. I try to make these doubles simply can't talk, at least not in human words, and if I can speak magic, I still don't know how. I wonder if that's Sariana's problem or mine. Probably mine. Still, this could do a lot for me. I'll need to check if I can throw doppelgangers into wounds while my actual body hides at a safe distance, or if there's some limit to how far they can wander from me before problems come up. Later, though. I really don't want people to see horrifying plague clones walking around my home in broad daylight and send someone to investigate. Ugh. I really am an idiot. I could have solved so many problems before I knew they existed if I found some way to tell everyone, don't mind the horrifying plague keeper, she probably won't hurt you too much, before I bugified the Stardust Seraph's insides. Maybe it wouldn't matter, maybe no one would accept my existence anyway, but it's not like it could have made things much worse than they are now. For now, I pull my awareness back into myself with a sickening lurch, let the double melt into mist and finally dissipate, and end my transformation, crawling back into bed with Pearl. I stay there until the light filtering through my curtains forces me to acknowledge that I've spent the last hour and some shivering in pain with my eyes wrenched shut, chasing sleep but never catching it. I should have just started a book or something, but then it's not like I can focus on anything except how much everything hurts on mornings like this. Finally, the sun forces me out of my nest. As I squirm to keep it out of my eyes, I can't help but imagine it speaking, asking me over and over if I've given any more thought to the idea of burning out my eyes and setting my soul on fire so that whatever's left of me can know all that can be known. At least today, it shouldn't be shining through every window at once. I stagger out of bed, summon my cane, and head out to find somewhere darker. I can't be bothered changing today, though. I'm joining the pajama cult. Sorry, Noirin. As it turns out, no matter how hard I try to just keep things quiet, ride out the pain, and think on what options I have left, everything reminds me of yesterday. The floor's patients and nurses are all gathered in tighter than usual groups, gripped by the same sort of quiet unease as after Yerflin, only more so this time, it seems like. Of course people are going to be on edge about having two unrelated monster incidents within a few weeks. Even in a place like this, full of people you'd think of as pretty high risk, if there's anything to those stupid videos about warding off harbingers with good mental health, that's weird and worrying. But this time, now that everyone with working eyes has decided how I fit into those incidents, there doesn't seem to be any uncertainty or unease around me. Several strangers at once look up to wave at me as I limp to my usual table. Everyone who glances my way does it with a smile, with a knowing sort of admiration. The morning charge nurse stops by to tell me that Banva will be out for a little while longer, but she's healing up well, and I suppress a flinch when she thanks me for getting her help so quickly. By the time I've settled in to search the sea for some distraction, the pall of fear over the room seems to have mostly lifted. I hate this. I don't want it. I don't deserve it. But I can't tell them that, since if I'm somehow making things better by sitting here and brooding, the absolute least I can do is let these people imagine that I'm some reason to be relieved. For at least a little longer, I can let them dream. They don't have much else. So fine. I guess this is my life now. No point in pretending I can have normal, quiet days and secrets that aren't obvious to anyone who looks at me. Pain aside, everything is on fire, and waiting around for the chance that my health will improve soonish can only hurt me more. I should be looking for some way to make things better. Just how? I don't have the strength to go find more health, let alone to hunt. Even if I did, I don't think I should. If the whole world turns on me and I'm left with no choice but to sustain myself the way I had been or die, I'd do it. I'm not a good enough person to die for anyone or anything, let alone the good of a lot of random people I'll never meet. Still, I don't want to run around hurting and terrifying those people, and even if I'm pretty sure that I have, I don't know yet if I've burned all the bridges that might let me find some better way to do things. So I glance around the room to see if anyone might hear me from here, then realize that they'd probably need to be sitting at the table or leaning right over my back to overhear me now. I shrug, scroll through my phone's history, and call Aisling. She answers almost immediately, "One moment, please. I'm in school." Quick footsteps and the sound of a door slamming behind her break the silence on her end, then, "Okay. There you are. How's your harbinger situation looking?" "Oh. I did say I'd call you back, didn't I? Sorry. I can wait if I'm interrupting something." "Nope, I get a couple of these calls pretty much every school day. Teachers know how it is. I'm just glad you're alive. Now spill." Right. That would have been a legitimate question, wouldn't it? Sorry again I left you wondering. It was just a really terrible night. But she's dead. One of the cases you pointed me to was her, so thank you for that. Glad I could help. I'd ask you to come report on her for our files, but you sound exhausted, she notes, no doubt noticing the change emergence has brought to my voice. Some other time, maybe. I think that's just how I'm going to sound from now on. Which feels appropriate. Oh. Aisling is quiet for a moment. Any other changes? None worth mentioning. And I don't quite understand it yet, but her power seems pretty good. Thanks. Maybe. I pause. That isn't exactly why I called, though. I'm still glad you're alive. What was? Does she not know? It doesn't sound like it, but she did hold things back to see what I'd say yesterday. My foot taps nervously on the floor. It hurts, but I can't quite get it to stop. Well, she's already heard me out and taken my horrible history about as well as I could hope for. If she hates me now, I probably deserve it. I look around again, finding no incredibly stealthy eavesdroppers. I didn't think to call you last night because after everything with Sariana, the Stardust Seraph showed up and attacked me because I wouldn't give him any of my weird blood. No, that's not fair, probably we both kind of started the fight, and we both kind of lost, and now I have no idea what dash. Hey. Slow down. I have no idea what you're saying and it doesn't sound like you're breathing, she says flatly. I suck down a whoosh of air too unnaturally quiet to be conspicuous. Okay. Now, start at the beginning. What happened? I don't know. He doesn't make any sense. He dropped out of the sky and crucified my harbinger, then stood back while I ate her, then declared himself in charge of making sure I wasn't doing anything else wrong. He wanted to follow me home or steal one of my feathers, said it just wouldn't be safe to leave me alone without being able to track me down whenever he wanted, and he wouldn't take, "Hey, you're incredibly creepy, could I call Aisling or Nyav or someone and bring them in on this," for an answer. So I tried to leave or get to someone else, he tried to restrain me, I tried to stop him from doing that, it got really bad. I'd hurt him a lot and thought he was about to kill me when we both felt someone else coming, and then he just stopped. He said it was Irita and I didn't want to know how she'd handle me if I thought he was nasty, then sent me on my way. Even made me faster before he left. I take another long breath and silently sigh it out. And I have no idea what happens next. He obviously isn't dead, especially if you hadn't heard anything about this until now. Probably flew off and got whatever emergency care he needed. But I can't imagine he's just going to leave this alone and I don't know what to do now. I've spent all morning trying not to panic about magic police or something storming my hospice. On the other end, there's the sound of something soft but heavy thunking against a wall. She's still there. It doesn't sound like she hates me. If she thinks I'm an absolute idiot everyone should avoid for their own safety, she's keeping it to herself. What about Tara? I ask. He was still kind of new during that whole thing. Tara was mostly Irita's problem. Oh. Okay. About that, actually, I swallow. What happens to keepers in, cases like this? What do they do about it? Aisling snorts. That depends entirely on what the local keepers have the will and ability to do about it when it happens. You're not in any meaningful legal trouble, if that's what you're asking. I'm not. I've assaulted so many people I lost count of them and never stopped to figure out what I was even doing to them. I still don't know. I've fought and severely injured 2 keepers. One time it was to actively protect a harbinger. I'm the sort of menace you only ever hear of in horror stories about things going really wrong in other cities. Why not? How? I spurt. Good question. Aisling says with a single bitter laugh. Here's my answer, say the council makes laws targeting a group of temperamental children who can upend reality at will. While depending on those same children, who very often do not appreciate being told what to do, to keep living psychological terrors from eating their souls. How do you propose they enforce any regulations on what keepers can or can't do? Get older, stronger keepers to do it? I try. Sure. Then they need enough of those keepers who agree with their laws and how violations of them should be addressed to make a whole magic legal system, and there just aren't that many of us, period. So I suppose they decided it was easier to skip the step where they write a bunch of rules that aren't worth the time it took to type them out. That's if they even manage to write them in a way that keeps Iona or someone from coming out against them and shutting the whole process down, and hope we'll handle magic problems our way. Wherever or whoever they come from. Okay. Fair enough, that sounds about right, I mutter. Yeah. There are laws written specifically for us, with for being the operative word. At least in this city, they're all to our benefit, things like the keeper emancipation policy. As for the rest, there's nothing that says keepers are above the law, but you'll literally never find one being charged with a normal crime in a normal court. Unless you're the next Sophia, I think the worst you get is church keepers keeping a closer eye on you and offering you mentorship a little more emphatically than usual. How does that work? Does it work? Tara and I can't just be the only keepers who've ever done bad things, can we? You're very much not. It's not a great system. Probably a good thing for you right now, though. You don't sound very happy about it. I'm not. It's not about you, though. I just want the world and society to make some kind of sense. Your whole thing sounds pretty bad, yeah, but we had the same terrible day yesterday, only it sounds like yours got a lot worse. I can believe you're trying and Roland just had incredibly bad timing. And you've helped us out. I don't want this to be any worse for you than it already is. I do still want to help if I can, I say. Isabel's my problem too. It just, might be hard. I'm out of health and everything hurts and I don't expect people are going to have a lot to spare for the girl who beat up a Fianata and made the Stardust Seraph puke centipedes. Centipedes, Aisling says. It doesn't quite sound like a question. No, fine, I probably don't need the details there. Look, I hadn't heard about this one way or the other until you brought it up. That means something. If you're lucky, it means whatever Roland wants out of you now, he's trying to handle it in that sweep-it-under-the-rug way the church likes to handle keeper problems. I'll see what I hear when I've got more time, poke you if anything comes up. Please don't start eating people again, if you really want to work this out civilly. Not planning to, I grumble back. Great. And if there's anyone else you think it'd help to get ahead of this with, maybe do that as soon as possible. Alright. Sorry again to drop this on you so early. And, thanks. I let her go. Okay. That could have been a lot worse. While I'm slogging through this anyway, is there anyone else? I don't expect Shona will react much differently to this than she did when I almost ate Maid. She seems like she just wants to be friends with everyone forever, no matter how little sense it makes for the people involved to share space. Yesterday, she even tried to pitch calling the Seraph in to fight Isabel's Harbinger, which is kind of strange, especially given that it sounded like he was looking for me for more than a day. Actually, Maid did say something about someone catching up with me, which feels very specific, in retrospect. Did they know? Was Shona hoping we could just work it all out while we were at it? I guess that couldn't have been any worse than what ended up happening. Still, I think the three of us are just not very compatible, in the end. They can think what they want when this reaches them. That only leaves one other person. PD. I ask my phone. A shiny eye with a dark, squiggly cuttlefish pupil blinks open beneath the clock display, coming into view as if it's part of a body that's still mostly camouflaged with the gently shifting sea surface background on the screen behind it. Find Naive Fianata's contact information and call her for me. That's Naive Fianata the Clarish Keeper, if there's somehow more than one. I normally just use manual searches for this sort of thing. Drives always seem prone to making mistakes no person would unless you're annoyingly specific with them, but right now, my fingers aren't up for it. The eye blinks at me, makes a little bloop of acknowledgement, then closes and disappears. Thanks, I say. My phone starts browsing the sea on its own, while I think about just what I'm going to say to her. I'll have to leave a message, if she's still out of reach, which is easier in some ways, but leaving messages always makes me feel weird about talking into the void at nobody. I didn't want anyone's help when I made the promise. I didn't want to bring any strangers into my problems. I still don't, really. I only offered to reach back out to Naive last night because if it had to be someone, I'd much rather it be her than the Seraph, but doing things exactly how I want to hasn't been going the best for me, and she has been through this before. She might still understand. She might even know what to do. Several seconds later, my phone chimes, then clicks. Hey. Who's this? Naiva's voice asks. Hello, I mumble, losing track of the message I was rehearsing. It's Ina. We met a little while ago. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to reach anyone. Oh, hi. Why not? Wait. I didn't think about it at the time, but why not? I just heard you were away and I couldn't contact you. I guess that was last night, though. I try. HM. Well, I'm in Alelsia right now and will be for a bit longer, but I still have my drives here. Obviously. And if I didn't at this very moment, I'd check my messages as soon as I could. So what you heard was mistaken, I'm happy to say. Anyway, how have you been? The Seraph sounded pretty sure when he said no one could reach Nyav, but now that I'm thinking about it, that it only makes sense if her evaluation involves some kind of nightmare soul surgery that leaves her out of commission for days, or it's one of those sanctuary inpatient things intense enough that they isolate you from the rest of the world until it's done. Was he mistaken? Why would he lie about that? I just started to make sense of what he might have been thinking, if keepers policing each other is really the whole of the law, but now I've lost it again. Ina. Nyav prompts. Terrible. I'm terrible at this. I've been in fights with 2 keepers for probably no good reasons, my magic is evil, and I don't think I can live without using it to do awful things to people. I probably should have asked for help a while ago, but I'm terrible at that too. So, if your offer's still open after what I did to your sister, I think I need it. Ah, she says slowly. I don't know if I was expecting to hear from you again, after you met Teth, but I did hope I might. Right. I guess you already knew that, didn't you? Of course it was stupid to think I ever had any secrets from anyone. She's from a family of keepers heavily involved in running the city. She could look into me and put pieces together if she wanted to, and she obviously did. Well, your presence does very much leave a certain impression about your power. I may have looked around and made some informed guesses. The second fight is news to me, though. May I ask what happened there? Stardust Seraph. Found out what I'd been doing and decided to try and bring me to justice on the worst day of my life. Ah, she repeats. There's a long, terrifying silence. Yes, I think we should probably meet. I'm not certain just yet when I'll be home, but I'll talk to some people before then, alright? I'll see if I can reach Roland or his sister right now. She's a good friend of mine. Until then, please try to stay calm. We'll figure something out for you. I'm not sure what to say. For a long moment, I just can't find any words. Part of me can't help but look for traps, search Nyava's freely offered assurances for some terrible thing she actually means. But there's none I can find, no threat that makes more sense than the idea that another keeper who's been through and done awful things might just want to keep me from ending up where she did. Really? Just like that? Yes. And if there's anything you think I can do to improve your situation before then, please ask, she says. Not unless you can find a lot of people who wouldn't mind donating chunks of their health to a keeper in need very quickly. But thank you. That may be more of a project, but if it's something you need to function, I'll see if anyone has ideas. Anything else? There is a thing I was wondering about that you might know. I just talked to someone else about this. I was worried I was, in trouble, on top of everything else, but she said laws pretty much didn't apply to keepers. Is that right? Have they really just given up on keeping us from being complete disasters? Oh, that I can answer. It's simpler than you might think. Nyava's voice sounds different, now. Almost amused. No one's given up. That's just the best way for things to work. For us and everyone else, it's to leave every possible opportunity open for keepers who've done wrong to change. No one is beyond redemption. No one should be treated as if they are. I've wondered myself about whether it's fair, if that's what you're thinking, but, well. I think it's a necessity of restorative justice when the cost of losing any one of us, to death or a life gone wrong, is so great. Right. That also makes a kind of sense. I don't know enough about the world or history or politics to say whether I think she or Aisling has the truth of it. Then I guess that's all for now. Thank you, I say, quieter than usual. Of course. I'll go see what else I can do. With that, she hangs up. Maybe everything isn't over. Maybe my life isn't on fire. Maybe it's not such a bad thing if people are happy that I'm here. But it does still hurt too much to think. A few more long, painful days pass like that. My health never improves, but to my surprise, it doesn't deteriorate either. I read books through the day, experiment with my plague doubles at night, which really do seem incredibly useful, and the only major issue I've found with them is that they aren't good conduits for my magic senses and check in occasionally with Aisling and Naive. Apparently, the public side of my incident with the Seraph is going just like my fight with Teth did, which is to say that Aisling still hasn't heard anything public about it at all. Meanwhile, Naive assures me that while Roland wasn't in good shape after he left me, he'll be just fine because his sister is the greatest healer in at least New Claris, if not the world. I'm not quite sure. Naiva's praise of her got pretty effusive. On the 5th day, a knock on the door interrupts my morning's suffering, followed by a nurse's careful footsteps. Lyodane. Good morning. How are you feeling? I groan wordlessly into my pillow. I'm sorry. I hate to make things any worse, but it is your infusion day. Do you think you'll be alright for that? I don't regret agreeing to the infusions. Suffering through them was the right call when I didn't have anything else. For all I know, they might have even helped. If I thought there was any chance they might still, I'd shrug, grit my teeth, and tell her to get on with it. Today, though, I roll over, pull back my sleeve, and point to a cluster of shifting, shimmering veins. I'm not sure if that's going to work. Oh. The nurse leans closer to inspect me. She sets 2 fingers on my wrist and waits, visibly paling. Lyodane, I can't feel your pulse at all. What's wrong? How long has this been happening? Head to toe, how are you feeling? Sorry, I don't think you need to worry, I say. My blood is just black and turns into feathers when it leaves my body now. I think. I'm not quite sure how that works under the skin. They don't typically draw blood from us on the 7th floor, other than the occasional test to figure out what's hurting someone or check to see if my medicine's working. This would be my first encounter with a needle since the last round of emergence. Oh. She stands there for a long beat of silence. I'm sorry, I wasn't exactly. I'll call Dr. Hines, okay? Tell him Dr. Cantillon might want to hear about this. Yes. I'll do that. I don't hear anything else about the infusion. Makes sense. They probably aren't used to testing to figure out if their patients with blood-based diseases still have blood. But later that day, not long after sunset, Aisling calls me unprompted. It's the first time anyone but Dad has called me and I'm not sure how long. Hi. How are things looking? Have you not heard? She sounds more tired than I've ever heard her, which is saying something. Heard what? I bite my lip. That could be my problems or Isabel's or any completely unrelated disaster, and I don't even know what to steel myself for. Right. You're still not on Lighthouse, are you? I knew that. Yeah. You should fix that. Just thought you should probably know if you didn't. She heaves out a breath. Shona is dead. Missed the evacuation or something, the keeper said. Well, whatever, you're safe now. Get out of here. Roads are clear, far as I could see. Maid recognized her now, in the light, though they'd never actually met. Mary Highland, carves the night. Fine. She'd take any help she could get. No. My partner's in there. We need to help her. Maid held her breathing steady, trying not to think about the way she last saw Shona. Trying and failing not to think of her as what's left of Shona. I'm a keeper. My partner's screaming him Shona. We aren't some bystanders. Oh. Ha. Mary's featureless steel mask scanned her up and down. Where's your stuff? She asked. I don't know. Something happened in there, that thing did something to us, and Maid reaches again for her magic and finds nothing. It's as gone as if it had never been there. Fine. You're right. I can't do anything right now, she admits. It hurts to say, but all her pain is doing is delaying the reinforcements. Just go help her, okay? Don't worry about me. And be careful. This one's really bad. I was sure I took its heart while we were in there, but it didn't matter, it was some kind of trap. What does that mean for her? Maid did absorb that trapped heart, even if the thing didn't end up taking her. Doesn't matter. Not now. Smothering all of the panic crackling beneath her nerves, Maid opened Lighthouse and did the only thing she still could: add everything she'd seen in the wound to the initial alert. There had to be something there the others could use. She hadn't even finished typing when Mary reappeared through a fresh tear in the world. What's going on? How bad is it? Are you waiting for the others? There, Maid tabbed away from her half-finished battle report to check on the responders. Still en route. Irita was closest now. Mary muttered, pointing a thumb over her shoulder at the portal behind her. There's nothing there. That can't be, Maid growled. I mean, no, it is, but where'd it go, then? Can't you follow it? Mary shrugged. I can't. Maybe someone else'll sniff it out, but I've got nothing. No. Maid balled her fists, thumping one weakly against her hip. It can't do that. That's not how it works. It can't just leave. She can't, her voice died out with a choking sob. The last bit of strength that hadn't left her with Shona fled her body. Everything was spinning. It felt like she was going to puke. She slumped to the ground, sucking in deep, gasping breaths. Damn, Mary said. There was a long, heavy pause. That sucks, huh? Maid lifted her head to glare at the blank gunmetal face staring down at her, astonishment mingling with the raw, hollow pain she felt gaping in her chest, stealing all her air. Mary stiffened, holding her position a moment longer, then turned, sliced open a gash in the air, and disappeared through it. Leaving her alone on the silent, empty street outside the monster's abandoned nest. It feels like she's the last person left in the ruins of a dead city. Shona is dead. Ashling's words hang in the air, pressing down and down like a stone on my chest. I don't think it's shock, exactly, it feels too blunt for that. It's not like this is some sudden, unheard of tragedy. Shona's a keeper. Keepers die sometimes. It's awful, the same way it is when anyone dies, but everyone knows that's a real risk. I don't even think this death feels different because I'm part of the group that dies in battle all the time now. I was already as doomed as anyone could be. No, the difference now is that I knew Shona. And I dragged her into one of my nightmares right before it happened. How? I ask, breaking the long silence. Something stormed in on the edge of the city. Probably came from the forest, sounded like a cluster bee from reports I've read. It was some sort of fungus monster that parasitized people and harbingers both. Shona and Maid were the first on the scene. They killed something else it had eaten and kept in its wound, thought it was over, and her voice cracks on the last word, cutting off her blunt, clinical overview of the events. It wasn't, she finishes simply. Only Maid escaped. By the time anyone else showed up, it was gone. No one's found where it went yet. That's most of what I know so far. A fungus monster from the forest. Every breath makes the weight on my chest heavier. Was there a big swarm of moldy worms and oozy starfish and things like that? No. Nothing's happening here. I went to the forest once and saw it, that's all. Or at least this sounds like the thing I saw. I don't know. Aisling sighs, abruptly deflating again. Right. Of course you did. A solo walk in the woods is very you. It was a bad idea. I know. I try to swallow, but the muscles in my throat won't work right. Just like the trembling hand struggling to hold my phone. Just like all the rest of me. It wouldn't have happened if I'd been there. I don't mean I would have killed it, but I don't think she could feel when something was too much for her like I can. I could have pulled them out. She didn't have to. Don't, Aisling orders. Seriously. There's so much keepers can do, but we don't get more time in the day to actually do it than anyone else. You are not responsible for everything you didn't accomplish or prevent because you weren't there. Start thinking that way and you'll destroy yourself. Okay. I don't think she's right, and not just because of some nitpick about how I could be in two places at once if I wanted. I wasn't doing anything but being sick and worrying about myself when I knew Sarianne had hurt Shona too. But I don't see the point in arguing with someone for thinking better of me than she should. What are we going to do, then? Are you tracking it like you did with Isabel? Why would I? If the thing comes after us again, I expect it will, after how its first incursion went and we can't figure out how to handle it, I'll burn questions then. But otherwise, Shona is already gone. Killing it won't bring her back. I guess it won't, is all I say. I can't stop thinking about how it must feel to die in a wound, dragged body and soul into the depths of a harbinger's mind, but why torture Aisling or myself with every horrible idea I have of how things might work? Not that I have a choice, in my own case. The thoughts aren't going anywhere. The funeral's on Thursday, Aisling says after another silent stretch. If you're feeling up to it, I think she'd have liked. That feels like a bad idea, I try to interrupt. I don't think I'll ever be able to speak over someone again, but Aisling does cut herself off. Don't get in your own way again, she says. You aren't wanted, and Roland is obsessed with his image. He wouldn't dream of starting anything at a keeper's funeral. And after it's over. Aisling lets out a groan. Fine. It's not that important. Just something to think about, okay? It helps having other things to focus on. I'll see how I'm feeling. My health isn't doing so well. Another long pause. Have you been through this before? I don't know. Probably. But I don't much want to talk about her. Aisling's voice is tight, but quieter than before. Sorry. Fair enough. I wouldn't either. I'll go, then. Thanks. For letting me know. Of course. Take care. She's barely finished the last word when I end the call. Leaning heavily on my cane, I struggle to my feet and make my way to my bed. Pearl sits swaddled in a cluster of unmade blankets. I sit on the foot of the bed, pluck her from her nest, and squeeze her tight, staring aimlessly out at the night sky. I don't think I've ever gone to a funeral. If I was at Mom's, I was too small to remember it. I've never been that close to any of the people I knew were dying. No one I like on the 7th floor has died yet, at least, and I don't think I'd have wanted to go even if I was. I didn't need any more reminders of mortality. I still don't. As near as I've always been to death, this is the first loss close enough to me to matter as anything more than an abstract reminder of the horrifying, implacable forces that eventually steal everyone from everyone else. I don't know what I'm supposed to do at a time like this. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel, except I can't help but feel like it should be so much worse. I should be weeping and screaming and paralyzed with grief. But there's only a vague, aching hollowness in my chest, not quite like the numb pain of my blood racking my body, and the pangs of guilt that come with every thought about how I might as well have killed Shona myself. It feels less like losing a friend in a sudden freak accident and more like learning that I let Alunla drown some nameless woman. Why? Yes, I could have kept her away from that thing if I'd been there, but I wasn't. I was in no condition to hunt. Aisling's right, there's no sense in blaming myself for that. Maybe Sarianna's attack left Shona in a bad way and she did something reckless, but that's Sarianna's fault, not mine. Maybe this had absolutely nothing to do with me. Maybe it's just a horrible thing that would have happened whether or not Shona ever got tangled up in my messes. This isn't working. I don't know if anything will. But eventually, after who knows how long of watching the stars twist and dance, the spiral of nonsense whirling through my head leads me back to the one thing I've always done to make sense of my thoughts. It's been a bit since I've had the time and focus for a proper reading, and while I don't know how focused I'll be on anything right now, I can't think of what else to do. I head back to the desk, set Pearl next to me, and start shuffling my personal tarot deck. Until my shivering hands lose their grip on it and half the cards scatter to the floor. Of course I'm too sick to manage even this much. Stupid. Should have just kept to the pile shuffle, but even that would feel exhausting right now. Although I can still do a reading. I don't need to move at all. In a flash of emerald light, I summon my keeper cards, now arranged into a deck stacked on the desk rather than an orbit floating around me. I haven't tried to read with them since I made the promise, for a few reasons. At first I couldn't read them at all, either to process the swirling sigils they're labeled with or make sense of the abstract scenes on their faces. But I do understand that glyphic language now, spoken or written, and I have a lot more practice in looking at manifestations of magic and puzzling out what they mean. The other reason, the more important one, is that somehow, trying at all felt a little intimidating. Ominous, even. I know there are depths to what my power is and what it's expressing that I don't completely understand. I've known from the start that there must be more to it than gathering up my misery and hurling it at others. Cruel and capricious fate. Afflicted arcana. But nothing I've done or consumed has left me with a sense of what those mean or what I'm supposed to do with them. I don't even think fate is real, and everything I know agrees with the idea that it's impossible to predict the future with magic. If reading with magic cards did anything special, then, I imagined it would be an enhanced version of what I actually use tarot for, understanding myself and my own thoughts. And I don't like myself very much. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what my cards had to say about just how awful I was. I'm still not. But right now, I don't know what else to do, and maybe I owe it to Shona to try. So, cards, tonight's question: what is wrong with me? What is going on that's left me too broken to feel more than this dull ache for my dead friend? What, exactly, am I blaming myself for? Do your worst. I will the deck to shuffle itself. It scatters across the desk, just like I would do it, then sorts itself back into a wide fan-shaped display. I wonder if it's saying anything by presenting itself like this. It's a technique I've seen before for encouraging people to pick cards from anywhere in the deck rather than just drawing the ones on the top, but not one I normally use. It shouldn't make a difference if they're shuffled properly, after all. But there is something to the feeling that you have a direct hand in what the deck shows you, and I suppose I do have more control over my fate, whatever that means in the real world, than most people ever will. I glance across the fan, then pick a card near the left end, float it out, and turn it over. The design on the card is familiar, closer than I've ever seen to one I recognize from my actual decks. It's an upside-down image of a decaying crow's skeleton, but wreathed in enough inky black feathers to nearly reconstruct what it might have looked like while it lived, save for the bare skull. Death inverted. The card I've come to think of as my card since I made the promise, the one whose meaning my power turns on its head. Here, though, this doesn't feel like it's saying something about my magic or my bizarre relationship with this specific card. These cards could show me anything at all, but right now, it's just like the one in my favorite deck. And this card in the past position, while I'm thinking about my messy relationship with a dead friend, it's easy enough to imagine what it's saying. It doesn't matter that I could have saved Shona if I'd happened to join her on a hunt. There was no reason for me to go on. That's not what this is about. She might not be dead because of me, but honestly, it would be going easy on myself to think of my failure as something so simple. I never helped her, never even tried, because I treated her as just another annoying person trying to throw a dying girl a scrap of acknowledgement so she could feel nice about herself. But that just wasn't the life I was living anymore, and things were different with her. Or they would have been, if I'd let them. Shona was only ever nice to me, in her own weird way. She kept reaching out and trying to be my friend well past the point where it would have been reasonable for anyone to hate me. I'd only just reached a place where I didn't feel strange about saying we were friends. I never told her that. I never stopped treating her like a nuisance I barely tolerated. And now she's gone. My first tears of the night start falling. Only a few silent droplets, but I guess I'm getting somewhere. That was only the past, though. Only our short, stupid history together. What's wrong with me now, cards? Turning my attention back to the fan deck, I focus on a card in the right corner, pull it out with my will, and drift it to the right of death, setting it down before I turn it over. This card is more difficult, to say the least. Its art is a jagged mess of 3 or 4 different scenes, alternately flowing into each other or simply overlapping, like one piece of paper housing several drawings, each laid over the last, sometimes in ways that make it look like the past artists came back and tried to fix their defaced work. I bring it closer to my eyes and squint at it, searching for any clear element to latch onto and work from there. There's a person falling through the sky, I think, but it's hard to be sure because they're censored into a fuzzy, pixelated mess. The foot of an ornate throne. A child's sketch of a girl weeping while everything around her burns. The torn, filthy remains of a white ribbon. My throat goes dry. I can't tell what any of the full images would look like, or how they're meant to connect in the places when they do, but the implications. The memories they force to the front of my mind. Those are all too clear. I try to read the sigils above the mess, themselves fused and knotted into an illegible mass, but I don't need to read them clearly to feel them. Death deity hath death, the glyphs say. Inverted, by the text's placement. Ha! I murmur. There are no duplicates in tarot decks. So how? A voice echoes through my memories. We constantly cheat at tarot, it says. It's my voice, the voice of the other me I met when I made the promise, only it sounds the way I sound now. The seraph must have choked the sound out of her, too. Fine. Then why? What do they have to do with Shona? What about them is important enough to stack the deck with this card? And one of those intrusive thoughts I shoved away earlier comes screaming back. Death inverted is an ending not being allowed to come to fruition. Something lingering. Trapped. What is it like to be killed by a harbinger? To have your soul sucked out of its shell and drowned in the depths of a living nightmare's heart, just like we do to them? Is there some half-digested fragment of Shona lingering inside that thing from the forest, screaming her pain into its soul and never knowing if it even understands? Magic and death are both complex things. Vuji said that about witches with dead harbingers. At the time, I didn't understand what she could possibly mean. I didn't see what could be so complicated about dying, the end of everything a person is. Maybe I was just looking away from the obvious. Because I already know what it's like for harbingers when I absorb them. I have 3 sets of memories of being eaten by myself to pull from, clear as any of my own. And I don't eat harbingers for sustenance and burn them up as fuel for my growth, do I? They become part of me. They shape what I am and what I can do. Wilt and fill this world wilt. Drink it all. Become true. Together. 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 I turn my gaze inward, to where my power roils in a storm of my pain. You're still in there, aren't you? I ask the empty room. In a chorus of wordless voices I recognize all too well, more pulses of emotion and sensation than clear statements, my soul responds. Dizzying confusion. Longing for someone who never existed. Despair for a beautiful dream and hatred for the girl who crushed it in her fragile fingers. And in the oldest song, the one soaring above them all, bolstered by my constant pain, joy. Gratitude. Pride. I bury my face in my hands and try to scream. Only an eerie echo of a wail comes out. A gentle breeze blows through my room, like the ghost of a hand across my cheek. These stories all end the same way, whispers another familiar voice, one I'm certain I've never heard before. They never end. Not ever. Who's there? Which of you? I croak. Only silence answers. Fine, then I'm losing it. That's nothing new at all. Maybe I'm some freakish exception. Maybe my desperate rush toward immortality has shaped my own soul into an eternal hell for everyone I claim. No, I already know I'm not. My cards won't let me lie to myself. Why else would harbingers shape emergence for everyone? Why should it be any different when they eat us? And how am I supposed to grieve for someone who's still there? Still suffering? It's perfect for you, though. Isn't it? My voice again. You will never die. Never ever. I want to be me forever, I hiss back, trembling, brushing silent tears off my sleeve. A chunked up piece of my soul lingering in something else's gut isn't living. Why not? As long as you exist, in any form at all, there's still a chance to change your fate. You've already chosen suffering over oblivion, and that was when you didn't understand that there was only ever one choice. So don't lie to me. I know you. I am you. A hand reaches over my shoulder. The pallid, emaciated arm of one of my echoes, black veins pulsing with blood that is not blood, points back to my cards, indicating the empty spot to the right of the first two. Finish the reading. What's the point? They're all the same card, aren't they? Yes, my voice giggles. But you're always getting lost in the now. Staring helplessly at what is and forgetting where the choices you've made lead. Looking back when you should be forging ahead. The entire deck flips itself over, exposing 76 variants on the same scene. Shadowed, spectral outlines of me seated on dark thrones, attended by swarms of gaunt, unliving centipedes and the endless reach of my own withered limbs. Each bears the same small glyph. Death inverted. Half-formed dream scenes fill my world. The faint wisps of life always pricking at my senses floating in the void, bits of power entirely detached from the people they belong to. Fields of them, cities of them, all just waiting for me to breathe in and claim them. My soul ripping my body open like a cocoon and crawling out, shrouded in damp feathers and dripping black blood like afterbirth. Hunting through many sets of eyes, many MES, each her own world-twisting curse pulled up from the black sea inside me and sent forth to take whatever we need. Death is only a distant nightmare, a threshold I will never cross. Death is a curse on us all, the end of every ill fate. And curses, too, belong to me. All you have to do to get there is take what you need. If there's not enough, take more. And if it's not enough to make it there alone, take enough to share. Take the thing that ate her, pluck her from its rotten entrails, and pull the death from her until you can put her back together. Just stop flinching away from everything you could be.